How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of July. Today, energy bills finally fall as a new price cap comes into force. But is it enough to help you cope with the cost of living?
Anarchy in France. Violence and looting continue for a fourth night in the wake of the fatal police shooting of a teenager.
And what drink could you be buying that has more sugar than a can of Coke or even a Mars bar? We'll find out. It's going to surprise you.
Yeah, very surprising. And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
After the hottest June on record, what do the first couple of days of July have in store? Well, bright and breezy kind of sums it up. But for more details, join me later for your full GB News weather forecast.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond. And this, of course, is Breakfast on GB News. So it's the first of a new month.
Yes.
Do you make first of month, new month, sort of, what do we call it? Resolutions.
Resolutions?
Yeah.
No.
I do. Every first of every month.
Do
I
you?
always make a resolution.
Oh, what's your resolution?
Well, it's usually to stick to a diet.
Oh.
And so today is day one of my diet. Right?
Oddly enough, I've just said I need to get back on the old diet.
Yeah.
Need to lose a couple of pounds.
I know a lot of people would say July isn't the month to do it, because you sort of think of holidays, and we'll be talking about that thing that's going to have more sugar in it than a Mars bar, just an ordinary drink.
So you're going on holiday this month?
And I'm going on holiday, yeah.
That's,
And I know that, but when you anticipate a holiday, you always think, I'm going to lose a bit of weight before I go on holiday.
Yeah. But I always think summer's quite good because you can eat salads. You can't eat salads in winter, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah, you need filling up in winter, but anyway, if you are making a new month resolution, let me know what it is and how long do you normally stick to it?
About a fortnight.
I'm going to be resolute this time.
You meant to say 2 white rabbits on the first day of the month, aren't you? Oh, pinch punch, yeah.
Load of rubbish, that is, but there you go.
It is.
But yeah, no, if you've made a new month resolution, then let us know what it is.
Yes, it might be to save a bit more money. You might be able to, actually, because families across Britain are getting a bit of a boost, sort of, to their budgets today, with the average household energy bill falling by £426 a year.
Which sounds really good. A change to the energy price cap has come into force following a drop in wholesale prices.
Now, it is, of course, long-awaited relief for consumers, but bills are still almost double what they were before the energy crisis hit.
Well, joining us is Malcolm Grimston, who's Senior Research Fellow at Imperial College. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
Yeah, so it's the first of the month, and it sounds like good news, but is it? And how did it happen in the first place? Can you explain to us all about energy price caps and how they go up and down?
Well, yes, price caps are not meant to be the price that you pay. Broadly, they were introduced towards the end of last decade because most customers were shopping around and getting a reasonable deal, but there were some customers who weren't confident in shopping around, and there was a sense that they tended to get the rough end and were paying too much. So the government's introduced a price was saying, just to protect that group of customers who aren't shopping around, you can't charge more than this. But most of us were getting much cheaper than the price cap because we were shopping around. Now, then the crisis came, and you had the problem that the middlemen, the supply companies, 30 of which actually went bust, were having to fulfil contracts they'd signed with their customers at a low price, but were having to pay much higher prices for the actual gas and electricity they were passing on. And that became very difficult for them. So the government had to move the price cap up very significantly. We've been through a period where the price cap has been the price. It's a price floor as well as a price cap. Now, the world energy situation is easing very, very rapidly now. The measures that we took against the Ukrainian invasion are beginning to take place. We're coming into summer in the Northern Hemisphere where demand tends to fall anyway. And the Chinese economy has been stuttering a bit by Chinese standards, which has reduced demand globally. So we are seeing that wholesale prices globally have come down by about a factor of 10 from the worst moment. Take a little bit of time for that to work through. But what the ideal is we go back to a position where the price cap is actually irrelevant for most of us because we're shopping around and getting a better deal than the price cap itself.
But are we at that point now where most of us will be, certainly in the next month or two, paying, the standard variable rate will be less than the price cap?
Yes, I think we're heading into that territory now, and we'll be back towards a point where people who, there's been no point in shopping around, and indeed many people have been forcibly shopped around because their company went bust, if I can put it that way, and ended up on the tariff that was set by not just the price cap, but the government's also chipped in a considerable amount through this price guarantee, which they paid directly to the supply companies, which kept our bills down. Now, that scheme is no longer needed in government's eyes. I think that's probably fair, because the price cap is now down way below the level at which the price guarantee was a few months ago. So we are moving back towards a position that I think we'll see the power companies now offering rates below the new price cap. And that's, assuming there are no enormous shocks coming in the world energy, and you can never be that sure of that.
So our viewers watching right now, their next energy bill should be lower than the last one, should it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And where did they come up with this, the average household energy bill falling by £426? That's over a whole year, is it, that 426?
Yes, it is, yeah. And the average bill, it, like all averages, it's got some use, but it won't apply probably to any single family in the country. Because what's actually capped is the price per unit, not the total bill. So it's still worth our while. One of the good things about power crisis, if there are such things as good things, is that it does make us take energy a lot more seriously. So our individual use of energy goes down, and that does save us money because the cap is on each unit we use, not on the overall amount. So we should see that as the next months unfold, people will start seeing offers coming in at a unit price below there. But that average there is this mythical average household in the country.
Yeah, well, in terms of those offers coming in, at what point, if ever, are we likely to see these fixed price rates? Because obviously they've not been abandoned, but every energy company, mine included, is where your best is just to go onto variable rate now. That's the best offer we've got. Are we going to see these better offers and fixed rates coming back in? Yes.
It's a matter of confidence. The power companies need to be confident enough in the world situation that they're not just going to walk into another set of crises, which, I say, saw 30 of them go bust over the last 2 or 3 years. So there's always just as there was a delay in prices going up, because we saw a massive increase in energy price, but it was a little bit slower to come onto our energy bills. So they will come down more slowly than the wholesale price. And actually, the wholesale price is only half of our energy bill in a normal market because we're still having to pay for the wires, which...
all the infrastructure.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. And that hasn't, and those costs haven't changed materially just because of the world energy costs going up.
What about the standing charge then? Because there was a lot of concern through all of this that obviously energy prices were going up, but standing charges were increasing as well. And a lot of people were questioning why that was happening. There's no requirement, presumably, for those standing charges to be brought down.
No, I mean, they do face normal inflation problems. The fact is that the cost of commodities to keep the grid going, for example, have faced very significant inflation. So there's been a need to increase prices because their costs are going up. But the ultimate thing is we need our power companies to make enough money to keep going. Otherwise, we really are in a mess. And how they raise that money, whether it's through a standing charge or through the rate, is arguable. Standing charges are bad news for those who don't use very much energy, but quite good for high energy users as a proportion of their total bill. And therefore, particularly those who are least well off tend to suffer with high charges. And that's why there was a big focus on that. That focus, I think, will continue, and we may well decide we do things differently in the future. But if we're going to have private companies running power, and it makes a lot of sense to do so, then they have to make a reasonable rate of return. That's not outrageous in the way that I think you can argue the oil and gas companies are. But the middle companies are not making any money at all at the moment, and it won't help any of us if we see ongoing collapse of that part of the market.
But that's where shopping around, I suppose, it's understanding your bill, isn't it? I mean, I must say, most of us, you get a bill and you just, and you pay it. You don't look at the thing, but I presume the price per unit will be on the bill, won't it?
Yes, and I think...
And standing charges and things like that. So price per unit, you might see, will have gone down from your last bill, but the other charges may not have.
Yes, that's right. And when they first, in the early days of privatisation, you may just remember, I do, people going around door to door saying, what do you think of this energy company? And then finding suddenly that you were signed up without realising.
Yeah.
That knocked a lot of confidence, I think, with people shopping around. Now, that's probably worked through the system by now. But for many people, this is quite complex. There are companies out there that do it for a living, the price comparison websites, a number of which are very good. But it's so tempting. One of the things about paying energy by a standing charge is it just goes out to your bank account without you noticing it. And you don't also directly notice when you've made an energy saving. Because if you put money in, the next bill comes up, you probably, as you say, don't really look at the bill. But when prices go up, that does change, because people then get much more interested in what they're paying for.
Yeah. Malcolm, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
You've got to be more consumer aware, haven't you?
Yeah, it is.
When was the last time you looked at an energy bill?
No. You see, you don't, but that standing, the direct debit thing.
Yeah, then that means you don't look at these.
But you don't look at the bill because you're not actually paying the bill in that same sense, are you? You're just stacking up cash,
right.
And then when the bill comes, you've got an account there to pay it.
I guess we all ought to be more savvy about these things.
Oh, should be.
Look at the bill and see what you're actually
Well,
paying
I think
for.
there'll be a lot of people now, when it's available, looking at whether they can move on to a fixed rate, and a cheaper fixed rate, and get that sort of bit of security back that way.
See, this is what they should teach at school, isn't it?
They should do.
To be a savvy consumer. Since we have to consume and you have to pay for it, we ought to all be taught how to be much more wise consumers.
I tell you what struck me with that, though, was if this is all coming down and we are all ultimately going to be paying less than we were for our energy, that will affect inflation. That in itself will lower inflation.
Yeah.
So that's good news all round, actually.
Cross fingers, yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, British tourists have been warned about travelling to France as riots grip the country.
In fact, the Foreign Office has updated its travel advice now, warning British holidaymakers about possible curfews and disruptions to transport.
Violence and looting have continued for a fourth night in France after a teenager was fatally shot by police at a traffic stop.
Let's talk now to political commentator Alex Story. Good morning, Alex.
Morning.
I mean, it was a terrible incident, what happened with the shooting of that young man in France, in Paris. But why has it erupted all over the country in such terrible rioting?
But I think it's taken us by surprise in Britain because for some reason there's been a news blackout between what's been happening in France and what we've been receiving as information in the UK. It's really important to realize that this circle of violence has been constant. I mean, you might remember the story of Lola, that young girl that was found dead in a suitcase a few months back. You also remember a lot of the incidents from 2015, 2016. You'll remember the Charlie Hebdo attacks. France has been in a virtual state of civil unrest for the last 20 years. It's really important to see, I think, in this particular issue, the reason why it's blown up is because there's been a residual amount of discontent with Macron, with the state, and at the same time we've had we had filmed evidence of the tragic shooting. That in itself has become a cocktail for discontent, but it doesn't excuse the very high level of violence that we see unfurling across France.
But what we also have seen with this, which I guess tends to be a common thing, partly down to social media, is there is an assumption that this was not a justified or righteous shooting before there's been a full investigation, actually.
Well, I think that's partially the problem. The police in France, as I mentioned before, is in a constant state of emergency, actually, and the President Macron decided to side with the perpetrator in a way. I mean, if you look at the photographic evidence or the film evidence, it's not really clear that the police officer acted badly. In addition, the police officer is a decorated officer. He had, I think, 2 or 3 medals for valor, one that was given to him by the Ministry of the Interior. So he was actually a reputed, very well-respected officer. And I think the idea that you just judge somebody before you gauge whether they were innocent or guilty is one of these things that happens more and more in today's world, perhaps because of social media, but perhaps because politicians find it a convenient way or an easier way to try and take pressure out of a situation. But actually, that's the wrong thing to do.
It's interesting because social media has clearly played quite a big part, almost coordinating some of these riots. And it's thought that it's very young, well, not very young, but young children or young people, teenagers, who are taking part in these riots because social media is telling them, urging them to. And meanwhile, President Macron is telling parents to keep your kids indoors.
Well, that's right. I mean, one of the things that he's been saying is, or they've been seeing because of the arrests that have been made, is that you have a lot of children under 14. There is obviously the thing about social media is that it makes you a star instantly. You know, if you're the person that torches a car, there've been 2,000 cars that were burnt over the last 3 days in France alone. That's quite a large number, and you can see the excitement. A young child goes out, he feels that he's got the power. He burns a car, or he attacks a building, and eventually he gets 1,000 likes on social media. So that is an issue, and we also have to try and get to the. We also have to be. We have to be critical about the way that the youngsters have behaved, rather than do the usual knee-jerk reaction of attacking the forces of law and order in France. I think that's really important, to at least give them some time to be able to restore the situation.
How does France go about resolving the bigger situation here? Because you say, you know, a series of incidents, high tension, high pressure. I mean, even since the Gilets jaunes stuff a few years ago, I mean, there just seems to have been nothing but protests in France for a very long time over differing issues. Is this something that can be resolved? Is this a long-term problem?
Well, it's a very difficult one because France has a very complex past. I'll go through it quickly. But since the French Revolution, we had 5 republics, 4 monarchies, 3 revolutions, 2 empires, and a fascist state during the Second World War under Pétain. So you've got every 15 or 16 years there is a new desire for change, and very often in France it comes through violence. The reason why I'm saying all of this is because we have to realize that the French Republic is a very unstable creation. It's the 5th one, as I said, and every time you go through, every time you look at or you try to understand the situation in France, the option is always to dismantle the order that you currently have in order to get somewhere new, or to a new and better place. In Britain, we've had the same monarchy for the last 1,000 years, so we never had this desire for change or for societal change. But the key philosophy in France is that you can change through violence, and that's really what's being taught at school as well. I went to school in France, and I remember being told to revere the French Revolution and the killing of the king and everything else. It was seen as progress, and the problem is, if that's what you want, if that's what you teach your children that the best way to get change is through street violence. And in fact, in France, the street is seen as an arm of democracy. So you have the parliament, you have the republic, and you have the street as legitimate places to conduct your democratic right, and that leads inevitably to violence.
And it must be almost impossible to police. I mean, I know the police have come in for a lot of criticism, and they themselves have said that they are at war with savage hordes of vermin in France. It's not a good look for anyone, especially when President Macron is seen dancing at an Elton John gig while Paris was burning. Not a good look at all.
Yeah, I mean, people tend to say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure rhymes. And there's a certain sense of 1789 there, with Marie Antoinette asking her citizens to eat brioche rather than bread. There is this sense of decadence as well with the French elite, where Macron gets sucked into greater and greater supranational and globalist types of meetings, whereas at home his nation is falling apart. I mean, what we have seen as well is the inevitable rise of Le Pen, and one of the articles that I wrote about 5 years ago was the fact that France needs to have the flexibility of its own currency in order to be able to deal with its very rigid social system. But the problem is that the euro is a straitjacket that is imposing an enormous amount of constraints on the French economy. And so what we are seeing is perhaps the inevitable rise and victory of the Le Penist, of Le Pen at the next presidential election in a couple of years' time.
OK. Really good to see you this morning, Alex Story. Thanks very much indeed. You know what? It's the first time I've heard an analysis quite like that makes me think, actually, we've got a lot to thank the monarchy for.
Yeah.
I know we've always talked about the fact it brings stability. I never thought of it bringing stability in those terms.
No. But, I mean, a lot of people, when you say there are terrible riots going on, a lot of people say, oh, well, the French are always rioting about something. And that is, now we've just heard why. And that's fascinating. But would it put you off going to France for your holidays at the moment?
I would at the minute.
Yeah, it would, because it's flaring up anywhere. It's not just Paris. It seems to be flaring up all over the place. And you wouldn't want to be, facing that sort of thing in the streets around where you were staying.
Isn't it interesting well, it's the same when things happen over here, anywhere, I guess. There are just some people who just will jump on any excuse to have a bit of a riot or...
But those pictures just look terrible.
I mean, horrific.
Explosions and 20,000 cars on fire, didn't he say?
No, I think it was 2,000.
No, I think it was 20, he said.
We'll have to play that back.
Yeah.
See, but a lot of cars, nonetheless.
Could you respin us and just tell us what it was that was... I think he said 20,000. It was an astonishing figure, anyway, for 4 days.
Scary, isn't it? Look, still ahead, the pressures now facing food production here in the UK. This is Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your weekend weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Yes, it's a bit grey out there for many of us first thing, but it should get a bit brighter. Bright and breezy kind of sums up the weekend. There will be some showers, particularly across the north, close to this area of low pressure, and that will also generate some strong winds, especially tonight and tomorrow over northern Scotland. For most of us, as I say, just a bit of a breezy day. Yesterday's cloud and rain has been cleared away. It is fairly grey to start with this morning, and a little bit of light rain and drizzle here and there, but that is petering out. And skies are generally brightening up with some sunny spells for most of us by lunchtime and through the afternoon. Now, one area it's likely to stay pretty wet, the far north of Scotland, especially Shetland, looks like having a fairly soggy day. Light winds here, but the wind's picking up across the northwest of Scotland, blowing in plenty of showers over the Highlands. The odd one for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, but many places across England and Wales will stay dry and bright. Temperatures high teens in the north, low 20s further south. If you're heading out this evening, again, most places will be dry, but take note across northern Scotland. Further showers to come in here, and the wind's just strengthening further, getting really quite gusty tonight and for tomorrow across a good part of Scotland. Still further outbreaks of rain to come over the Northern Isles and more showers to come into western Scotland. But otherwise, most of us having a dry night, a fresher night as well, not quite as humid as the night just gone. Temperatures down to about 11 to 14 Celsius. Sunday then, dry and bright for much of eastern England, southern England, the Midlands, Wales, sunny spells through the day. There will be more cloud at times for northwest England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland with some showers. Those showers pretty frequent in the northwest. Because it's so gusty, the showers will tend to zip through, so the weather chopping and changing quite a lot. Fairly gusty conditions though across Scotland. Could push some showers to the east coast, but I suspect most places here will be dry. Temperatures a little down on Saturday's values, high teens in the north, maybe 21 or 22 in the southeast.
6:25 morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Yeah, and we were talking about the fact that it is the 1st of the month. It's the 1st of July already. Gosh, thank you. That's my bad arm.
Oh, sorry,
no,
is
it wasn't. I just said that. But is it, yeah, what do you make beginning of the month resolutions? I think I do every month. I always say, this is the month I'm going to do blah, blah. This is the month I'm going to start. It's usually starting a diet or giving up something like sugar in your tea.
Yeah, Sharon's been in touch. Morning, Sharon. I'm no longer going to have sweeteners in my coffee from today. I've already given up sugar. Now it's time to have my coffee alone. Actually, you get used to it so quickly.
You just have to stick with it for the first few weeks, no, days. And then you can't... And then when you taste it with sugar in it or with sweetener, it's foul, absolutely. So, yeah, it's worth doing. And if you've got a resolution that you're making today on the 1st of July, let us know what it is.
Oh, yes, please. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, pressure facing food production is more real than ever. Continuing challenges such as green and financial issues are placing farms right under the microscope.
Well, our Northern Ireland reporter, Doug Beattie, has been to the launch of a new joint venture.
With governments continuing to drive towards net zero, it is somewhat on a collision course with farmers and, in turn, food inflation. Northern Ireland's Department of Agriculture has acknowledged the problems and is now working towards a solution that uses DNA technology to bring down CO2 levels. Victor Chestnut is the chairman of the SRG, a new board that is creating a database to breed in higher yielding and therefore less methane producing herds.
Identifying better genetics has no downsides for a farmer. No matter what breed you're in, no matter what, whether you're beef or dairy, knowing what you're breeding from and being efficient cuts emissions and increases your profitability.
There's nothing new about genetics in farms. In fact, it's been going on from around about 2009. But what is different here is this is government taking the lead with those from the industry, the Livestock and Meat Commission, the dairy producers, and more importantly, the farmers themselves. Martin McKendry is from the Department of Agriculture and says that the government is listening and working alongside the industry.
There's a very clear agenda, there's a very focused agenda here in Northern Ireland, and to be fair, the industry have worked very much in partnership with DAERA in terms of developing this proposal. and the launch today of the SRG board, which is representative of all parts of the agri-food industry, is a great statement from the industry.
Chief Executive of the Livestock and Meat Commission, Ian Stevenson, believes efficiency will keep costs under control.
Well, I suppose the price of food really boils down to the efficiency that which that food can be got to the consumer shelf. So the more that we can produce livestock more efficiently in terms of less feed intake, using genetics to improve the resilience of those animals, how quickly they grow, how quickly they can produce product for the market, then that ultimately feeds through to, you know, a more efficient and more cost-effective product getting to the consumer shelf.
Milk prices are still on a downward slope, and Dr. Mike Johnson points to some of the factors causing milk prices to fall.
Well, the markets are what the markets are, and there's a number of drivers that are influencing the supply side. Globally, we've got a lot of milk that's being produced. Recent figures from New Zealand showed that they're seeing very significant increases in their milk production, the same in the United States. So there is at the minute an oversupply.
There's a cost and a benefit. There may well be, after deer might do something initially, but we may end up having to DNA tag, but it will be a quite small cost for the benefit we can get if you know your best cows to breed from and where you need to be.
As for the cows, they just wanted to move along and decided that no comment was better. Dougie Beattie, GB News, Brisbane.
Love it.
An aggressive cow there.
Do you know, I love cows.
Yeah, if you're listening on the radio, there was a cow there that went for Doogie's microphone.
Yeah, well, it looked very tasty, to be fair.
What? The cow looked tasty?
No, the microphone looked tasty. Oh, no.
No, I know.
No, but I'm from a farming background and a farming community, and so if you've ever been in a milking parlour, there's nothing like the sound of a milking machine.
Basic farming, isn't it? It's lovely. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. I love all of that. And I don't think farming gets enough coverage,
no, it doesn't.
if you like. I mean, it's so essential.
Most of us never think about the farmers and the way we all rely on farming. And I don't think I've ever realised what it was like until I watched Jeremy Clarkson's farm.
Oh, right.
Which you haven't seen it yet.
No.
I'm going to tell you, it is utterly brilliant.
But it's a tough job.
It's very tough, yeah. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah. No, I spent half my youth on a farm. And it's... and
we take
fabulous.
them. I think the point is we take them for granted.
Totally.
They're doing all that work, and you get up very early in the morning. You see them out on their tractors. They're already out. And I used to live very near a farm, and you'd see them out late at night as well with the spotlights.
Oh yeah,
because they have to get things done at a certain time of the year, and the margins are critical, aren't they? You know, they've got to finish a job, and it has to be finished by tomorrow, and so they're out all day and night sometimes, and they do the most remarkable job. And you just think it's pretty pictures, but it's not, is it? It's really, really hard work.
No.
Got any farmers watching?
If you've got to clear out the slurry.
Any farming families?
I used to do that.
Clearing out the slurry, that sounds horrible.
Clearing out the slurry. Yeah, but oddly satisfying. If you've done it, oddly satisfying. I don't know why.
Well, cleaning out anything is satisfying.
Yes.
It's just horrible, but it's wonderful when you've done it, isn't it?
Anyway. Coming next, we've got all the stories making headlines in the newspapers. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
6:33, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Should we take a quick look at today's newspapers? They're leading on lots of different things, actually, at the moment. Boris Johnson has done his big thing in the Mail again. And
it's another wet weekend, isn't it?
It's a total wet fish. Can't understand why he's writing about it. Anyway, front page is all about dentists. We're going to talk about this tomorrow, so actually have a think about if you've got a story about how difficult it is to get hold of a dentist and what the government has now realised they will have to make them work for the NHS when they qualify. It's an interesting back page as well on the Daily Mail. The day the ashes went up in smoke. We'll be talking about that a bit later too.
Front of the Telegraph. Let me find that. Oh, there you go. It's a stark picture of a French street. This is in Marseille yesterday. I mean, the rioting has just gone right across the country in France as a result of the shooting on Tuesday of a teenage boy. But it's honestly, it's just as we were talking earlier on, it's just the idea that the French just take it to another level when it comes to the rioting.
Yeah. If you have a quick look at the Mirror there, the front page, my goodness, that's a terrible one, isn't it? Kevin Spacey, a sexual bully. And their back page is quite stunning too. Again, it's about the ashes.
Bazball.
Bazball in ashes.
It seems like a bit of a stupid idea to me, Bazball. The idea that you just slog it out the ground, sort of things every time without playing more tactically. And that's it.
That's what they do in baseball, isn't it?
It's just what you do. That's the technique now. That's what you do. You just smash it every time.
It doesn't seem to be doing us any good. That's the problem. Right. OK, should we have a look at what's inside the newspapers?
Yes, we better have. Joining us this morning, Assistant Editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu, and journalist and author Ella Whelan. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Cindy, let's start with the Telegraph, should we? Looking at French police in, this is a quote, at war with vermin.
Yes, this is a quote from a member of the French police who have called the rioters vermin, which probably doesn't de-escalate the situation.
It doesn't, does it?
And the French police, I don't think, has de-escalated the situation at all because they're incredibly heavy-handed. Overnight, a teenager has been declared dead after falling from a roof as a result of these riots. Obviously, the rioters themselves take things to an extraordinary level as well. We've seen buildings burnt down, cars destroyed. There's some real violence over the death of the 17-year-old who was shot dead. And, the last time this happened, or the worst time this happened in 2005, riots lasted for 3 weeks. So this could not be anywhere near the end at the moment.
No, and there doesn't seem to be any great political intervention that we're aware of. I mean, President Macron saying, parents, keep your children at home, but that seems to be it so far.
I'm not sure how parents can keep the rioters at home when the police can't even keep the rioters peaceful. It does seem
so many of the rioters appear to be young children. They're children
absolutely.
of about 14 or something.
Yes,
and it's because social media is actually energising them, encouraging
And it's
them.
interesting that Macron is blaming this on video game culture as well, that they're almost playing out this video game culture, which I can kind of believe.
It looks like the worst sort of video game, doesn't it, when you look at the film?
Go on, Ella.
I'm not so sure. I mean, Nahel Mazouk was 17, and so I think it seems to me at least understandable that young people his age, Gérald Darmanin is talking about the fact that it's the Interior Minister, that it's mostly young people. I mean, when one of your peers is what appears to have been shot point blank after being stopped on a traffic offence. I think probably it's quite admirable that young people not care enough to burn down vehicles, because that doesn't necessarily help anyone, but to stand up against the French police. I mean, we have to put a bit of context here, which is that, Darmanin is known as Darmanin the Sordid because of the way in which his tactics are, and indeed Macron's security force is, as Cindy says, so heavy-handed. The previous Interior Minister was called the Blinder, because so many rubber bullets and things that the French police use blinded people. They chuck tear gas in the drop of a hat. Tear gas is used like kind of a traffic offence. It's ridiculous. And I think a lot of people... my story that I'm picking up on is in The Times, which is talking about the fact that UK tourists are warned not to go to France, and they're calling on Macron the pressure is on Macron to call a state of emergency. But I think it just shows you that if you're talking about France is meant to be this place, there's liberty, equality, fraternity. It's meant to have a very coherent sense of national community, of values. And the problem with France has always been that doesn't extend to the suburbs in Paris, to Algerians, to other parts of the French community. And this is fueling why, the fact that it never is a sort of your average Parisian that gets shot by the police. It's always someone like Nahal, is part of what's behind here. So simply saying that it's to do with video games and things like that, that would make me go out and start torching some
He is
cars.
handling this in a peculiar way, isn't he? First of all, he's seen, dancing at an Elton John gig while Paris was burning. and then he also appeared to side with the police straight away after the shooting.
Well, his nickname is Petit Jupiter or something. His nickname is, he's like the little prince, Macron. He has always in his... Even though he's sort of like the technocratic hero of the European elite, where that he's meant to be so fair and wonderful and progressive, he is incredibly authoritarian in many ways. Does not care about, policing by consent, seemingly. I mean, just remember only recently when the police went in and essentially cracked the heads of Real Madrid fans when that all happened. It's just, something that would never happen in this country, thankfully, but a sense of disproportionate kind of response that I think most people find baffling.
But I'm not sure you can put that down to Macron. I mean, these protests have happened every few years ever since the 1970s, really, which is when France really kind of brought in so many of the people who lived in its former colonies, for example, Algeria. And so you've got these ethnic tensions here. You've got the heavy-handed culture of the police, which I don't think it predates Macron. Because every few years something like this happens.
Yes, it's always been like this.
And the protesters, the rioters, are always pushing it very far as well. So it's very violent on both sides, and I think that's just a culture that, for us in the UK, I think we find very hard to get our heads around. And I have no problem with young people obviously like fighting for the rights of especially non-white French people under police violence, but looting shops, burning cars, that's unjustifiable.
Plus, we haven't established that this was not a justified killing.
Yes, although the video looks quite...
Yeah, but he had been stopped multiple times and then kept driving and then refusing to stop at police stops.
You still don't shoot somebody in the head for a traffic offence, do you?
Well, you've got to look at the detail, though. We don't know all the... My point is, we don't know all the detail.
Again, going down to police culture, the fact that they have live fire, traffic police have live... Why?
Well...
why do you need that?
But isn't it totally knee-jerk for the Foreign Office now to warn us not to go to France?
Well... on the one hand, there's mayors all across the country that have instituted curfews. So even if you are going on holiday, you probably don't have that much fun in certain areas of France. There is Darmanin has clamped down on saying all the buses and trams have to stop at 9 o'clock. So there is, they're talking about declaring a state of emergency. That seems bit ludicrous to me because it's not, you should be able to get a handle on this. As much as I don't support the French police cracking heads, that the idea, Cindy says, that you can't get a handle on this doesn't seem logical. But on the other hand, if they are declaring a state of emergency, then probably it's in the logic of how these things run, it seems sensible. Streets are being torn up in Marseille and Lyon and Nantes and all over the country, and who knows where it's going to go next. So I think it's something to watch.
So if you had teenage kids and you were going to France at the moment, you'd be a bit worried about them just sending them out to the shops.
Absolutely. And if the government didn't put forward that health warning and some Brits did get caught up in it, we'd be asking, why didn't they say anything about it?
Yeah, I think we would. There's been a lot of concern over NHS dentistry in the UK for a long time now, and the lack of it. The Mail picking up on something that we got from the announcement yesterday that actually could have a pretty immediate impact, Cindy.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the idea that British dentists would have to work for the NHS for a certain amount of years before they go to the private sector. But during those years, they would still be able to work for the private sector as well. So the idea is that you've taken British taxpayer-subsidised medical training, years and years of it, and medical degrees are one of the most expensive degrees out there. You can't take all that money, subsidies, and then just go immediately make money for yourself.
But apparently that's what's been happening for years.
That is what has been happening
So the NHS, we help to train them, and the minute they qualify, they go private.
Yeah, and I think this is a great idea. The British Dental Association has said this is not going to fix everything, and also that you shouldn't be forcing dentists to stick on a failing ship. And it's like, well, that's not a good, nice way to talk about the NHS.
No.
But anyway, I think the idea that, you know, they don't have to pay back this subsidy is ludicrous. And of course they should commit to working for the NHS for a bit.
But as Stephen said, if they bring this in, then it could have an immediate impact, couldn't it? It means that all young dentists now who are just about to qualify will have to sign something saying they will give so many hours a week back to the NHS.
And it could mean that people actually get to see a dentist because at the moment, I mean, I know I got kicked off I hadn't been for a few years. You know, you only go to the dentist really when you've got a problem, you know, unless you like sitting in that chair. And so it had been a few years, and I went to where I've been since I was a kid, and they said, no, I'm sorry, you've been kicked off the register because you haven't been for a while. I said, OK, put me back on again. No, we're not taking NHS patients. They said, but if you want to come in as a private patient, we've got an appointment this afternoon. So for lots of that seems, I think it's understandable, Cindy says, that lots of people look at that and think, that is incredibly unfair, that can't be how it works. But you have to ask the question, why is there no sense of why are we not able to instill in people who, particularly, you know, doctors, dentists, GPs, who have gone through the NHS system, that sense of public service, of wanting to come out the other end and do the public service.
But this was a Labour change, wasn't it? Labour brought in the move where they could just go private.
It may well be that it's quite difficult for some dentists too, because I've got a dental surgery in my village and they want to do NHS work and they've been told no because there is all of the NHS money for that area is already taken up. So even though for years now they have wanted to do NHS work, they can't.
Yeah, I mean, the dentists come back and say there's a real problem with funding. If I do this, if I do an NHS appointment, I'm effectively doing it for free, which you can understand why that's a problem as well.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting one. If you've got a view on that, let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com, because we're going to be talking to a dentist about that one tomorrow. Ella, ending the feud over Diana in the Express.
Well, the drama continues. So today would have been Diana's 62nd birthday. And yesterday there was an event for the Diana Trust that, you know, both Harry and William have always been heavily involved in, the Diana Award charity, apologies. And they usually have, well, for years they met up together, they did it together in person. It was seen as a central part of their duties and something that they obviously held very dear to their heart. And now they are reduced to doing it separately, not just but both through video message. They won't acknowledge each other, they won't look at each other, but obviously they won't look at each other, but there is no recognition that the two of them are brothers, that the two of them are sons of this woman. And so, there is a royal correspondence calling them on them to end the feud. But I think it just shows how the depth of the problem within the royal family at the moment, regardless of any of sort of the other discussions about racism or things like that. There is just this deep sort of feud going on within the family itself, and the Express.
It's just not that easy to say just end the feud, bury the hatchet.
Particularly when when one of you has published stuff about the other, which is sort of probably semi-unforgivable.
And I think on the question of Diana as well, Harry uses Diana's memory so much, doesn't he, in his attacks on the royal family. And this is pure speculation, but if you were William, who also lost your mother, you probably wouldn't want your mother's memory to be used in such a way for personal attacks on yourself, on your father, on everyone else around you. So it sours that memory completely. It's a completely underhanded, I think, thing to do for Harry to keep going with that.
Yeah, it's like using children as a tool in a divorce, isn't it? I mean, it's
emotional blackmail.
Yeah.
It's saying, I understood my mum better than you understood her. And it's, it's not okay. It's not on. So I think that's why her memory is particularly sensitive.
It's hard to think of her at 62 as well.
Isn't it, just? What was she when she died? 37, I think.
It's also just, I mean, the Express picks up on the fact that the royals are now doing 31% fewer duties than they did 4 years ago. And just, I mean, you know me, I'm not a fan of the royals, but looking at that contrast between the years of Diana, where in person, actually shaking hands, pressing flesh was all part of it, now to being reduced duties and on video message, I'm not sure that's quite the
but
same.
don't forget, Diana did that. She was getting out and about for PR reasons, wasn't she? Because there's obviously everything going on.
But you can't say that. I mean, William and Kate seem to be everywhere at the moment, don't they? They've got an awful lot of work going on. They're always pictured doing something.
And the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh have been very busy.
Yeah. Yes, you just don't see their pictures quite so much. It's always William and Kate, isn't it?
Right.
Fewer working royals, I guess, as well.
To The Guardian, and another sort of blood feud, if you like, almost. Sunak versus Goldsmith.
Yeah. And I think looming over this rivalry is Boris Johnson still. So what's happened is that Zac Goldsmith, the former candidate for London Mayor, a former Tory MP who's made a lord by Boris Johnson, has now quit the government as a climate minister because he says that Rishi Sunak doesn't have enough momentum behind the agenda now that Boris Johnson has left government. He says that the government has been paralysed from the top down because they don't see this leadership.
He said Rishi was disinterested.
Yes, it's a really punchy resignation letter. And you know the bit where they normally say, I have been very privileged to work in the government and thank you, Prime Minister, blah, blah, blah. He says, I have very been privileged to work with people around me, and explicitly does not say anything nice about Rishi Sunak. But the reason I say Boris Johnson looms over all of this is that Zac Goldsmith has always been a Boris Johnson ally. It's interesting that after he quit, Nadine Dorries, that famous eco-warrior, came out to say, oh, this is a great move, Zac. I think what's interesting is just how much this is that it's Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak's rivalry that still kind of bleeds through this, and it's just one of the final Boris Johnson allies to be kind of leaving government.
It may be totally wrong of me, but I get very annoyed by people like Zac Goldsmith who are so, and he always has been, to be fair, but such an eco-warrior. I get annoyed by it because he's so unbelievably rich that he can afford to be an eco-warrior.
It's the only way he finds his authority. Zac Goldsmith's commitment to the climate is not about the climate, it's all about Zac Goldsmith. I mean, I hate him from the days of the mayoral election, whereas, I'm no fan of Sadiq Khan, but that was a bad choice between the two of them. And there's, the way in which he talks about climate change, if you listen to some of his speeches in the Lords, it's intensely undemocratic. It's intensely punitive, the sorts of things he suggests around how it might change working class people's lives. And it's all about trying to say, there is in fact, interesting things happening across the whole of politics at the moment. The row between Pride and Just Stop Oil, the way in which the climate is talked about in politics. It's as if, it's a morality contest. Unless you say the green agenda is the top of it and that's all that matters and everything comes second, you're wrong, you're evil, you're awful. And, of course, it's not that simple.
No, it's not. We've got to leave it there. Cindy, Ella, thank you both very much indeed. See you a little bit later on.
Now to something we were teasing you with earlier. We all know that soft drinks and sweets contain obviously very high levels of sugar. But did you know you could be buying a drink that has more sugar than a Mars bar or a can of Coke?
Yeah, a new survey conducted by Which has revealed iced coffee drinks from high street chains contain exceptionally high amounts of sugar.
And I like an iced coffee. I hadn't really thought that it had that much sugar or sweetener in it. We're joined by a nutritionist and weight loss coach, Olivia Parry. Hello there, Olivia. I expect you've always known this, have you, that high street iced coffee is only really palatable because it's got so much sugar in it?
Well, I was actually quite a sugar addict when I was younger. So when I figured out how to lose weight, which is why I do what I do, my choices are different now, and I tend to just order a decaf black Americano. But drinking your sugar, drinking your calories in any form is not a wise move.
No, I mean, and just to put it into context, a Starbucks caramel frappuccino with semi-skimmed milk contains 12 teaspoons of sugar. I mean, you wouldn't think about putting...
And the daily recommended amount The daily recommended amount is 30 grams. So you're already 1.5 times your daily recommended amount.
Yeah, that's nearly 50 grams
just
of sugar
appalling.
in
I mean,
that.
some of the high street chains actually do offer sugar-free syrups. And I know there's been some stuff in the press about how unhealthy certain sweeteners are. But honestly, sweeteners are better than sugar. It elevates your triglycerides, it makes you produce more insulin, which causes fat storage, leads to type 2 diabetes, leads to overweight, obesity. Obesity levels have doubled since the 90s. I mean, why is that? It's because we have so much sugar and so many processed foods now. They're ubiquitous.
We've got to have the sense to say no to these things, though, haven't we? Because, I mean, faced with a cup of iced coffee, a glass of iced coffee, I guess, you can down that so quickly. And as you said, you've already gone over your sugar limit anyway. In one gulp, almost. You're probably going to have another a bit later on in the day. It goes with the hot weather. It's just too easy to take in that much sugar, isn't it?
And the problem is sugar is highly addictive. There are animal tests only, but from virtually every single person I've ever worked with, it is addictive. And the thing is, your insulin levels and your blood glucose levels spike, and then they go right down. And that's when your hunger increases. And you're kind of thinking, oh, I fancy something else now. And the cycle just continues, up, down, up, down, up, down. And when that happens, you store body fat. And it also makes you depressed. It has so many side effects, negative side effects.
Yeah, but we shouldn't be blaming companies like Starbucks or Costa or anything else for this, should we? Where's our common sense? Because there's no way you can order something like this, which is an incredibly sweet-tasting drink, and sort of not think it's full of sugar. I mean, this is our own fault, actually, isn't it?
Well, it's the personal responsibility debate that comes up time and time again, blaming people who are overweight, blaming people who have obesity because they don't have enough willpower.
No, hold on, Olivia. Hold on, Olivia. That's not what I'm saying at all. Don't suggest that. What I'm saying is, whether you're overweight or not, if you're drinking a very sweet drink, what on earth do you think's in it?
But some people, they just can't help themselves because it's addictive. They don't understand. They're a slave to their hormones. So in that sense, maybe it is the responsibility of these companies to reduce the amount of sugar in their drinks. And isn't it incredible that syrups aren't included in the sugar tax? They're exempt. And if a drink is made on site, it's not included in the sugar tax. I mean, how does that make sense? And the trouble is, again, with the personal responsibility, or if it's someone's fault, they can taste it sweet. The trouble is, where does it stop?
OK, we've got to leave it there. Olivia Parry, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Well, I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
gbviews@gbnews.com. I'm not convinced that we can abdicate responsibility. I mean, we've got to take some responsibility, haven't we?
Well, sweet things have got to be on sale, haven't they? You've just got to know when to say no.
Yeah, essentially. But anyway, let us know what you think.
Not easy.
This is GB News. More to come for you, including the very latest on what should be a reduction in your energy bills from today. Here's your weather.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your weekend weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Yes, it's a bit grey out there for many of us first thing, but it should get a bit brighter. Bright and breezy kind of sums up the weekend. There will be some showers, particularly across the north, close to this area of low pressure, and that will also generate some strong winds, especially tonight and tomorrow over northern Scotland. For most of us, as I say, just a bit of a breezy day. Yesterday's cloud and rain has been cleared away. It is fairly grey to start with this morning, and a little bit of light rain and drizzle here and there, but that is petering out. And skies are generally brightening up with some sunny spells for most of us by lunchtime and through the afternoon. Now, one area it's likely to stay pretty wet, the far north of Scotland, especially Shetland, looks like having a fairly soggy day. Light winds here, but the wind's picking up across the northwest of Scotland, blowing in plenty of showers over the Highlands. The odd one for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, but many places across England and Wales will stay dry and bright. Temperatures high teens in the north, low 20s further south. If you're heading out this evening, again, most places will be dry, but take note across northern Scotland. Further showers to come in here, and the winds just strengthening further, getting really quite gusty tonight and for tomorrow across a good part of Scotland. Still further outbreaks of rain to come over the Northern Isles and more showers to come into western Scotland. But otherwise, most of us having a dry night, a fresher night as well, not quite as humid as the night just gone. Temperatures down to about 11 to 14 Celsius. Sunday then, dry and bright for much of eastern England, southern England, the Midlands, Wales, sunny spells through the day. There will be more cloud at times for northwest England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland with some showers. Those showers pretty frequent in the northwest. Because it's so gusty, the showers will tend to zip through, so the weather chopping and changing quite a lot. Fairly gusty conditions though across Scotland. Could push some showers to the east coast, but I suspect most places here will be dry. Temperatures a little down on Saturday's values, high teens in the north, maybe 21 or 22 in the southeast.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
Good morning, 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of July. Today, energy bills finally fall as a new price cap comes into force, but is it enough to help you cope with the cost of living?
Anarchy in France. Violence and looting continued for a 4th night, with hundreds arrested and pressure mounting on President Macron.
And the Tour de France gets underway today. Thankfully, it starts in Spain, I think,
yeah.
So that's because of the riots. That might be a good thing. Aidan McGee will have all the details.
And as always, of course, we'll bring you the latest weather update.
After the hottest June on record, what do the first couple of days of July have in store? Well, bright and breezy kind of sums it up. But for more details, join me later for your full GB News weather forecast.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News. I was asking you earlier if you make new month resolutions, it being the 1st of the month today, the 1st of July, have you decided this is the day you're going to do this or that, for a whole month? Because I do it every month.
Terry in Spain says, I'm giving up Marmite mixed with my porridge today. After having it for 15 years, it's very expensive now and can no longer be afforded. I have tried that, because actually it was Christine Hamilton, who I saw on Twitter one day, said she had Marmite in her porridge.
The things people put in porridge.
And I love Marmite, and I love porridge. I couldn't get it to work.
That's really weird,
Terry
I
in
think.
Spain.
I mean, I understand putting jam in porridge, something sweet, maybe.
I know, but you see, I have salt in porridge normally. I just have a bit of salt.
Yeah.
And Marmite is salty, but it just didn't quite do it for me.
OK. Well, Terry in Spain have, jolly good luck with that. Giving it up might be more difficult. Is it really that expensive? It probably is in Spain, isn't it? Yeah. Is it?
Oh, Marmite's expensive, yeah. It's expensive over here. It probably costs more in Spain.
It probably will cost a lot more in Spain.
Yeah. It's pricey.
We're going to talk about power, the cost of power at the moment. Stephen in Nottingham says, here, Scottish Power have increased the daily standing charge of a monthly bill payer by 4p a day before lowering the unit price. Ooh, there's some stuff going on there, isn't there?
I suppose you'd say 4p a day. What's that work out?
Isn't it odd that you're in Nottingham and the people providing with power is Scottish Power?
So I don't quite understand how all that works. Because obviously you're not getting you're still getting the same power coming through the same tubes.
It just, yeah, okay, tubes.
How is it that we can get different power from different companies?
It's just different supplier, isn't it? It just goes through a different computer system.
Yeah, so literally all it is. So it's very weird. I don't understand the system. Should have asked Malcolm about that in the last hour.
Yeah.
Anyway, families across Britain are set for, what is hopefully going to be a bit of a boost to their budget today, because the average household energy bill will fall by £426 a year.
Now, a change to the energy price cap has come into force. That's what's causing it, following a drop in wholesale prices.
So, a welcome relief for consumers, but perhaps not enough, because bills are still going to be about double from what they were before the energy crisis began.
Well, we're joined here in the studio now by GB News' political reporter, Catherine Foster. I suppose it looks good. It looks good from a political point of view, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and it's nice to have something positive to announce on a morning, isn't it? So, yes, £400 better off over the next year per household on average. The energy price guarantee scheme that the government had brought in meant that the average bill would be £2,500 or no more than. And now the energy price cap that Ofgem put out is down to £2,074. One thing to note, do take meter readings if you haven't already and submit them to your supplier if you pay by direct debit, because then that guarantees that you will get the lower price as soon as you submit the meter reading today or tomorrow.
So it's something we should do today?
You should do it. What will happen otherwise is they will estimate that lots of people have smart meters, so they can know, but if you haven't, they will estimate your usage to this point, and it may be that you will pay more if you don't give your meter reading. You might do a bit better, but best just to put your reading in, and then you know that from today you're paying the lower price. But as you say, although it has come down, and that's obviously to be welcomed, average bills are still not far off double. I remember them being about £1,200, a few months before Russia invaded Ukraine. So they're still massively higher than they were, but a step in the right direction.
This is good for the economy, good for the Prime Minister, because if we're paying lower energy bills, that means there's less fueling the inflation levels. So actually, that's going to help inflation come down as well.
Yes, and the fact that energy prices rocketed was one of the main drivers of inflation. But of course, as we know, inflation is proving much stickier than the government thought, and Rishi Sunak had promised to get inflation down to about 5% by the end of the year. That's looking very difficult because it's about 8.7% now, and core inflation, I think, is still on the up. So a little bit of good news, but of course food prices are still going up. They're not going up quite as fast as they were, but they're still going up about 17% a year, aren't they? And of course, every time you go to the supermarket, it's just horrific. Prices are not going up by 5p, 10p, they're going up by 20p, 50p. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, did have a meeting with the consumer watchdog groups on Wednesday, wanting to say to them, you need to pass on savings. It's not OK to keep making these profits. And of course, we see, don't we, with the banks, interest rate goes up, the mortgages go up straight away, but savers are not, rates are going up, but they're not getting the same benefit. So the government are, putting pressure on suppliers, also the supermarkets, and say, what are you doing to keep prices as low as possible? But it doesn't really feel like that at the moment.
I'll tell you what, we need to shop about, because I know we say this, and I've one of my bank accounts, I've got a couple, and actually the day that the base rate went up by 0.5%, they increased the rate on savings by 0.5%. Did it on the day. They've done it every time the rates have gone up. The other bank account, which is a bigger high street bank, nothing.
Yeah.
So we need to shop about, actually.
You do, and you often tend to get better rates with the smaller banks and building societies that you haven't heard of. But, of course, lots of people don't have the confidence, do they, to put that much money into
to move things around either. But we've got to be more savvy consumers now. It seems that the emphasis is much more on us as individuals to look after our money a bit more wisely.
Yes, and I mean, I think we're all mindful of that, aren't we? You look at all the subscriptions you've got out, what do you not need, what can you... because prices have just... And most people's wages, OK, in the private sector, they've gone up more than in the public sector, but largely they're nowhere near what inflation has been in the last year or continue to be. So we are all effectively worse off at the moment, and we're feeling it too, aren't we?
Yeah, generally, I mean, after the big announcement yesterday on the National Health Service, and Rishi did his big sort of speech and everything, it's resulted in some much more positive headlines for the government at the moment, even grudgingly from Labour people saying, oh, not bad, OK, well done, Rishi, he's attacked this one. So from that point of view, it seems to have gone down quite well for them.
That has been received...
They've had a good couple of days.
Yeah, well, by pretty much everybody. I mean, the NHS England actually drew up the plan with the government's support, and it's going to take 15 years. So, unfortunately for Rishi Sunak, he's not going to feel much of the benefit from it. But it is quite unusual that something gets given such a positive reaction. Of course, Labour are basically just saying... well, you've pitched our plans, and the Lib Dems are saying, what's taken you 13 years, which is fair enough. But what was noticeable yesterday, I was at the press conference, was, of course, there's nothing about money. And going forward, of course, it would be brilliant to have far more doctors. I mean, there's huge numbers of young people leave with straight A's in this country and cannot get into medical school, and we're importing doctors from abroad, which is crazy. But nothing about money. And we've got, 5 days of junior doctor strikes. Consultants have voted to go on strike. I asked about that because last year the government was saying, oh, we'll give whatever the independent pay review body recommends. Now it sounds like the independent pay review bodies are going to recommend maybe 6.5%. And the government are already going, we're not sure that that's affordable. But great getting lots of doctors, lots of nurses, but you have to be able to retain people, don't you? And if you... So it's very difficult.
I think they're going one step at a time on this one.
Did you
see.
Running out of
time. I forgive me for not watching at that time, but did you get a question in?
I did get a question. I basically asked, amongst other things, if he was confident of being able to deliver on the 5 priorities, because they got cut waiting lists, which is one of them, emblazoned on all the podiums. But waiting lists are currently at a 7.4 million
gone up
high. And, these doctor strikes are obviously not going to have a good effect on that.
How did he answer? Did he fudge or what?
No, he said he was very confident on delivering on all of them. I mean, that would include stopping the bows, which, anyway.
Yeah.
And then he listed all the things that they are doing. He did say that waiting lists, he said, we knew that they would get worse before they get better. But he did stress things like, ambulance response times, which were absolutely dire in the winter, are getting significantly better. So, I mean, they're making progress. But the thing is, I think, to lots of people out there, if you've had your hospital operation cancelled, if you can't see a GP, it doesn't feel like that. And so for them to reap any benefit from them, this, I think, is going to be challenging.
People have to feel the benefit, not just be told it's happening. Catherine, thanks very much indeed. See you later on. It is 11 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories today. And Jeremy Clarkson's Meghan Markle column, published in the Sun newspaper a few months ago, was sexist. That's according to the press regulator. They ruled some of his comments about the Duchess of Sussex were pejorative and prejudicial. Clarkson wrote he dreamed of Meghan being paraded naked through British towns and publicly shamed. 25,000 people complained. However, the watchdog rejected complaints that it was racist, inaccurate or harassed the Duchess.
The world's largest airline is returning to Birmingham Airport. Emirates will resume using its 615-seater Airbus A380s from today for one of its 2 daily return flights between the West Midlands and Dubai, for the first time since the pandemic. The majority of A380s around the world were put into storage, apparently, at the height of the crisis, sparking speculation they'd never actually return due to the existence of more fuel-efficient aircraft.
Holidaymakers driving in Europe are facing higher fuel bills in most destinations than before COVID. New analysis from the Post Office found Switzerland has the largest hike in prices out of the 17 nations included in research. Forecourts in the country have increased average prices per litre by 38p for petrol and 42p for diesel since 2019. Yeah, but I mean, pretty much on a par with what we've seen over here. To be fair, whenever you go to Europe, the prices are pretty similar to what we've got over here. It's about that we moan about it over here so much.
But if you're thinking of going to France, there might be other things on your mind, because British tourists have been warned about travelling to France because of the riots going on in the country at the moment.
Yeah, the Foreign Office has updated travel advice, warning holidaymakers about possible curfews and disruptions to transport.
Violence and looting have continued for a 4th night in France after a teenager, of course, was fatally shot by police at a traffic spot.
Well, earlier we spoke to political commentator Alex Story.
I mean, it was a terrible incident, what happened with the shooting of that young man in France, in Paris. But why has it erupted all over the country in such terrible rioting?
But I think it's taken us by surprise in Britain because for some reason there's been a news blackout between what's been happening in France and what we've been receiving as information in the UK. It's really important to realise that this circle of violence has been constant. I mean, you might remember the story of Lola, that young girl that was found dead in a suitcase a few months back. You also remember a lot of the incidents from 2015, 2016. You'll remember the Charlie Hebdo attacks. France has been in a virtual state of civil unrest for the last 20 years. It's really important to see, I think, in this particular issue, the reason why it's blown up is because there's been a residual amount of discontent with Macron, with the state, and at the same time we've had we had filmed evidence of the tragic shooting. That in itself has become a cocktail for discontent, but it doesn't excuse the very high level of violence that we see unfurling across France.
But what we also have seen with this, which I guess tends to be a common thing, partly down to social media, is there is an assumption that this was not a justified or righteous shooting before there's been a full investigation, actually.
Well, I think that's partially the problem. The police in France, as I mentioned before, is in a constant state of emergency, actually, and the president Macron decided to side with the perpetrator in a way. I mean, if you look at the photographic evidence or the film evidence, it's not really clear that the police officer acted badly. In addition, the police officer is a decorated officer. He had, I think, 2 or 3 medals for valor, one that was given to him by the Ministry of the Interior. So he was actually a reputed, very well-respected officer. And I think the idea that you just judge somebody before you gauge whether they were innocent or guilty is one of these things that happens more and more in today's world, perhaps because of social media, but perhaps because politicians find it a convenient way or an easier way to try and take pressure out of a situation. But actually, that's the wrong thing to do.
No, it's an interesting analysis from Alex there.
Yeah, he was absolutely fascinating, actually, sort of just trying to describe why we always think the French are sort of quick to riot. And there's a real history to it, which is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. It's just Brian Reed in The Mirror, who does, like, sort of
being outrageous
commenty stuff. He says... after a survey in his own house. He said, but if you hear any man over 50 talking about how awesome last weekend was at Glastonbury, mind-blowing sets from Elton John and calling it Glasto, it's fine to slap them. I sort of agree. Did you watch Elton John last weekend?
Yes, I did.
Did you?
A bit of it, not all of it.
What did you think?
Well, I love Elton's music, but I do think that there's a time when you'd rather listen to the properly crafted studio version rather than just the yelling and the sort of voice that's got old now.
I mean,
and doesn't reach some of those high notes he used to.
Mark Dolan was going on, must be a big fan, but saying it was all marvellous, marvellous, wonderful. I thought it was rubbish.
Oh, I wouldn't think.
I thought it was rubbish. It was just an old man sat down at a piano. Sorry, Elton, but sat down at a piano. It all sounded very samey. I thought the vocals weren't good, and the special guests he brought out.
I don't know what happened to that.
Never heard of any of them.
No, I don't know what happened to that at all.
That was very odd.
But I do think the whole when you know the music so well and it's been beautifully crafted in a studio and it's got an absolutely brilliant and you get used to the way the singer sings it. I thought the same when I watched Cat Stevens, who I thought was absolutely brilliant and wonderful, but he couldn't sing his songs the way he used to sing them either. And I don't know. You love them because you remember what they were like in their heyday. I don't know why these big stars go on until they're very old and doddery. I really don't.
No.
Why can't they just sort of relax? They've made money. They've got houses all over the world. And they've got lots and lots of friends. Why don't they just sit back and enjoy their life?
Because they need to be adored.
Yeah, it must be something. It must be an addiction.
Need to be adored. Yeah. Anyway, let you know. Maybe we are being totally unfair. I don't know. I'm sure you've got a view. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Probably people sitting at home saying, well, why does that Anne Diamond go on?
Yes.
I mean, why doesn't she sit back and enjoy her own swimming pool and her beautiful lifestyle?
Yeah.
And her fabulous rich friends?
Have you got a swimming pool?
No, I have had in the past. I haven't at the moment.
Oh. Very nice too.
I would if I could. That'd be very nice.
Oh, there you go. Well, if you want to ask Anne why she's still
here... No, don't. I haven't got
Feel free. Aidan's going to be here with all the sport very shortly.
Not as old as Elton, though.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion. looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
7:23 morning to you. Aidan McGee's here with all the latest sports news. Can we talk about baseball? It's not working. No, it's not. It's not working, is it? Why don't they teach it?
It's not. I mean, look, the definition of insanity is when you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And look, it's hugely entertaining, and it's expansive. It's cricket that England haven't really seen since
People
probably
keep asking me what's baseball, and the only way I can describe it is you just whack the hell out of the ball.
I can't think of a better.
Try to get it to go out of the stadium or something.
Yeah,
like in
but when
baseball.
you've got three, when the opponents then stick 3 men on the boundary line, which increases your risk of being caught, you've got to change things around. And that's the whole point of Test cricket. You can't approach Test cricket, which is over. It's about longevity. It's about over weeks at a time, days at a time. It ebbs and flows. It changes. It goes. Sometimes in your favour. Sometimes you can be like England yesterday and lose 6 wickets for 46 runs.
It doesn't say much for Baz, does it? If he's not changing the.
Well, they're very cultish as well. They're very cultish. They're having interviews afterwards and they're defending it with their lives.
And yet they've just done really badly.
Paul Hawkins put out a tweet yesterday saying if only England's batsmen were as good in defence as they are in defence of baseball. And so, look, I mean, it was terrible yesterday, all out for 325. As I say, the last 6 wickets were lost for 46 runs. Harry Brook, excellent batsman, caught on a short ball. So this is the thing. If they hit you with a short ball, it brings the batsman out, and you can't play baseball that way. And Australia have been watching this for a couple of weeks now, since the Ashes started. They've been watching through the winter. They've done their homework. These are the world champions. And this is the thing, when they played last summer against Pakistan and New Zealand, they were playing sides that hadn't played much red ball cricket for quite a long time. Those victories looked quite good. Well, in fact, New Zealand was a draw, but they should have won. Australia was always going to be a different proposition. They've got a huge mountain to climb now.
I mean,
it's a shame because they played.
The commentators are actually blaming the baseball, aren't they?
Yes, they are. So this is
when's
people
the team going to wake up and take some notice of this?
I'm not sure they necessarily will, Anne. I really don't. I think
they deserve to lose then.
Well, I agree. You've got to understand that it takes different kinds of strategy throughout a long match like this, a long contest like this, to win. And if they go 2-0 down, which looks like it's going to happen now, they're in deep trouble.
That's awful.
Deep trouble. Look,
We're on our home turf.
I know. Look, it could go back to 2019 and they forced a draw. But you don't win the Ashes back with a draw. You have to win if
right?
you're to prize it back the urn. So we'll see what happens today. But yeah, you would have thought there needs to be a change of direction. And when Sir Alistair Cook is criticising you, he's not the sort of person to lay into. His criticism tends to be quite measured. Michael Vaughan as well, and on the back page of the Mirror today, Bazball in the Ashes. I think something's got to change, but I'm really not convinced that they will.
Is it the last day today?
No, it's not the last day. It's day 4 today. It goes into day. It's day 5. It's 5 days in total. Yeah, but that could then we go into the next. Well, I think the next one's Trent Bridge. Right. Or Headingley, possibly. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know. I despair at that because there's just no common sense.
But you see, you see it in other sports as well. They're just, sometimes teams just know one, or even individual tennis players, they only know one way of playing. And the whole point of competitive sport.
Because they trained that way, though.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, if you look at, there are lots of great tennis players. Nadal, Federer, they change their approach as their career goes on. According
to why they're great.
Without question.
Yeah.
Without question.
Tour de France, I always find it really odd. Tour de France kicks off today in Spain.
Bilbao, yeah.
I mean, they did it in the UK once, It seems a very odd thing for the Tour de France to do.
Yeah, it does. But the most pressing concern for them at the moment, they're getting it from all angles. I mean, they've got the safety concerns because the ride goes through Bordeaux. It's going to go through Paris as well. The riders stay in urban areas. Although most of the race is rural, the riders stay overnight in quite urban areas. They're in constant contact with the French Interior Ministry. They're hoping that the curfew on public transport for after 9 o'clock, no public transport after 9 o'clock, will be put in place. That might make things a bit easier for them. But they're also getting heat from the climate protesters as well. Now, we've seen Just Stop Oil in this country at Lord's recently. Obviously, as recent as a few days ago. We saw them at the snooker. We saw them at Premier League football.
Climate protesters don't like cyclists.
I know. Well, it was a big problem last year in the race, and they've said that they will find a way to disrupt the race this year as well. So it's going to be. Look, we've seen cyclists.
If it was a car rally or a motorbike rally, I can understand it. These people are pedal power.
I know.
What's wrong with them?
I know. Well, it's not necessarily a complaint. Well, it's the same with snooker. There's not really a complaint about the environmental effect, a detrimental effect on the environment from snooker, from the sport of snooker. But
just to get noticed.
It's about getting noticed. Yeah, exactly. And this is an international, a stellar, top-level sporting event, international sporting event, and I think they would be, listen. The other thing is it goes on for 3 weeks. So there's tlenty of opportunity. Tell you what they're doing differently this year. They're sending 2 motorbikes out in front of the race to try and quell that threat of protest, which they didn't do last year. But they had real problems with it last year, and this year, of course.
More than 2 motorbikes.
But I know. They might need a fleet.
Sounds a bit feeble, actually, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. Well, we'll see. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be in front of them.
No.
So we'll see. But I mean, look, we've got the favourite is a guy called Tadej Pogačar. For the Team Emirates side, it's almost a footnote, his progress, because of everything that's been going on the last couple of days in France. But it enters France on Monday. Hopefully, it might have been quelled somewhat since then. But if we think back to the riots in 2011 in this country, it went on for about 10 days, if you remember. And there's who knows when it could dissipate in France.
No, well, we shall see.
Meanwhile, Wimbledon. And I didn't know that Andy Murray goes into Wimbledon this year unseeded.
Yeah, that's right. His form hasn't been quite as... I mean, his injuries disrupted things as well, but he's still, as we mentioned yesterday, he's still got the determination to keep going now.
But it means that if you're unseeded, it means that you're more likely to face some very big players really early on in the tournament.
Yeah, you are. Now, the first round, you could say, look, he's facing a fellow Brit, which was unlikely, a guy called Ryan Peniston, number 265 in the world, a late starter. He only joined the tour last summer.
Now, he's a wild card, isn't he?
Yes, he is, and so he couldn't believe when his coach rang him. When his coach rang him yesterday and said, "You're playing Andy Murray," he thought his coach was having a laugh, and he couldn't believe it. And he's obviously brilliant. They know each other. They've knocked up together. They've practiced together. So that'll be great. But yeah, as you say, he's a wild card. Now, the winner of that tie will face either Stefanos Tsitsipas or the world number 3 Dominic Thiem. So it depends. They're going to have a decent knock against each other to get ready for that match. But listen, if you're Tsitsipas or your Thiem, do you really want to face Andy Murray at Wimbledon in the second round? You feel unlucky from their point of view.
Yeah, but Andy Murray must be feeling the same thing.
Well,
he's going to have to fight every round.
Yes, he's used to that. That's kind of what we expect now. But he was saying that his body just can't do what it was able to do 10 years ago. I mean, a lot of people can say that, but I mean, he said he used to go and play 5-a-side football after playing a 5-setter. He said, can't do that anymore.
No.
It's just not. He has to manage his body a lot better. But look, he's given it a go, and as I say, I'm full of admiration for him.
Oh yeah.
I know he's not your favourite.
It's not. I had loads of tweets yesterday from people saying they don't like.
Probably about your impression.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah, that's a very good impression.
But we're underway on Monday, and I think it's going to be between Djokovic and Alcaraz for me. That's going to be. Could be like a changing of the guard situation, but who would bet against Djokovic?
I wouldn't.
Aidan, thanks very much indeed.
See you later
on. We've got everything you need to know about all the stories hitting the headlines in the papers very shortly. This is GB News.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
$7:34, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning, Assistant Editor at The Spectator, Cindy Yu, alongside journalist and author Ella Whelan. Welcome to you both. So we're starting, Cindy, with you and the Education Secretary's relationship with teachers.
Deteriorates further. So what's happened here is that union leaders have actually briefed the IE paper and essentially criticising the Education Secretary. And bear in mind that the strikes are still not finished. We've got more strikes coming down the line next week in schools. And what they're complaining about is that Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, doesn't seem to understand inflation.
Oh.
Oh? So what they've said that she said, and double source and triple source, is that in a meeting she said that inflation next year will be lower, so 3%, and that will be lower than the wage increases that we've got on the table, 5%. Therefore, you're going to have a real terms pay increase. So this is a...
Yes, okay.
So the teachers are saying, do you actually understand the equation?
So they're getting onto teacher mode and saying, yeah, exactly, like mathematically that doesn't work. But this is a common misconception. When people say inflation is falling, they're not actually saying prices are falling. Whatever inflation has happened so far, the prices have already risen. Inflation is just the rate of growth. Yeah. So if the rate of growth slows down or goes down, prices are not actually falling, it's just it's growing less quickly. And it's concerning that Gillian Keegan doesn't seem to understand this. As I say, this is a story from union leaders, but she has also said on Sky a very similar argument. So it could well be that she is also a victim of this common misconception, which is concerning when she's the one taking charge of
negotiating
pay increases. Yeah.
Yes, it doesn't give us a lot of confidence.
No, and maybe it's being, you could even say maybe it's being a bit generous to say that this is simply her not understanding how inflation works, because I think the the government, recently, particularly in relation to the cost of living crisis, what's going on with inflation and playing around with interest rates, the government seems to think that all it needs to do is focus in on one particular stat or say that if we tinker with a little bit of percentage points here and a little bit there, everything will be fine, everything will be rosy. I was on a panel with a Conservative mayor the other week who said, don't worry about it, inflation's going to come down and we're going to have really good... Basically, he said, we're going to have a really good economy. And you were like, in what universe do you live in? Because, you might be able to say that there might be growth, there might be some kind of change, but it's not like pack up, everybody go home, everything, nothing to see here. So there is a kind of, I think there's a willful blindness to the actual level of problem that has been long-standing in the British economy.
If the people who are in charge of us don't understand it, how are the rest of us meant to understand it? I mean, that's the thing. How is the average man in the street meant to understand it if no one else is explaining it properly?
But I think there's also the discussion about the economy takes place on two levels, which is that the politicians and commentators like us or economists talk about. They say the interest rates are going to go up by this percentage. It's going to have a huge effect, or they're going to do this with tax, and this is actually a really big story. And actually, when I'm not sort of trying to patronise people who have normal jobs sat at home, but most of what you're thinking about is how much are my energy bills, how much is my food bill, how much are my wages, and you do a relatively simple calculation.
But don't you think politicians do it deliberately? They throw out an inflationary figure here and a percentage figure there.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm trying to say,
isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's sort of what I'm trying to say. It's not necessarily that smoke and mirrors in that kind of cynical way. It's just that it prevents them from having to have an actual conversation in real terms about how people engage with the economy.
Talking about a real conversation, on the front of the eye again, do most people in this country want to take strong action on immigration or not?
Yes, well, that question is... The government is now rumoured to be suggesting that question could be answered with a referendum. And so off the back of this rather embarrassing defeat by the government in saying that the Rwanda plan was unlawful, which, as the Eye and other papers cover, was sort of Rishi Sunak was taking it for granted that would be a win, and there was plans to set off planes in September and it was all going to be fine. That in order to sort of claw back some kind of legitimacy for their plans on immigration, the government is thinking about taking to the polls a kind of stop the boat style referendum. Now, I'm thinking of that clip that circulated about that elderly lady who said, not another one about referendum. That is probably the sentiment of most people. But, the way referendums are supposed to, anyway, as I understand it, be about gaining democratic legitimacy from the masses for politicians to be able to say, OK, this is clearly what we want. On the question of immigration is a complicated issue, as we know, but on the question of controlling borders, and on the question of being part of the ECHR or whatever, that has already been decided in the Brexit vote, because part of the Brexit vote was leaving the European Union, having control over your laws, borders, and blah, blah, blah. We know it. That's already been decided. Just do it. Just get on and do it. You don't need to have another kind of... And actually, the way in which the Eye is quoting how the government's talking about it, it's not to do with any kind of seriousness around immigration. It's about winning the next general election.
Yeah. Well, what on earth question would you ask in a referendum on this subject?
I think it's about whether or not you would leave the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think it's worth pointing out that comes before the EU. And I'm personally very uncomfortable about leaving the ECHR because this is a convention that came about after the Second World War.
Yeah, and didn't we basically set it up?
We basically started it up, and it was after the Second World War when people realised how Jews were treated in the Holocaust that we thought there has to be basic minimum standards for human rights. The EU then comes afterwards. They're not
the same thing at all
related. So if we're trying to back out of a human rights convention that we set up after the Holocaust, that should set alarm bells ringing. Why are we compromising on that kind of level of human rights? If Rwanda does contravene that, and we'll find out in the Supreme Court, then that should tell us something about this policy, that this policy does not satisfy minimum standards.
I don't know, Cindy, whether that's a bit of a sort of simplistic way of looking at what's happening, because I think that the ECHR is a very big problem for lawmaking in this country, and that's not because I don't think breaking human rights on the scale of in relation to the Holocaust is a bad thing. I think we shouldn't bring that up.
I'm not saying you are.
No, but this is the argument that's being made, is that if you support, which I don't, if you support the Rwanda plan, it's akin to, you want to do terrible things to people's human rights. When in actual fact, we know that it doesn't matter about the history. It does matter about the history of the ECHR, and you're right. But the whole way in which the discussion about passing laws, democratic lawmaking in a nation state has been had after Brexit, which is Brexit was a clear message from the majority of the voting public that they wanted to do things differently in terms of who makes the laws in this country. And then you have a clear problem with the government trying to enact any kind of immigration plan or strategy, that you have external, unelected lawyers, judges, whatever, stopping that. Now, you don't have to be a fan of the government's immigration plan, I'm not, to understand that that's a problem for democracy. So, as with many of things that are weird in politics, I find myself metaphorically in bed with some people who I completely disagree with on immigration on this, but by saying that the ECHR is a very big problem for this.
But I think
membership of it is a big problem.
areas in which sovereignty and democracy, sovereignty at least, have limits, right? I mean, just because, as I've said, it's inspired by the experience of the World War II. I'm not saying it's same. Rwanda is nearly the same at all. But what in that experience taught us is that refugees have to have a right to claim asylum. And that Rwanda does not allow them that right in the UK. And so that is contravening a very basic human right, which I think,
But should lawyers decide that, or us as British citizens?
Well, sure, you can have a referendum on the ECHR every 10 years or something if you would like, but I think there are certain things, conventions, like the UN Charter on Human Rights, that, fundamentally as human society, in a relatively developed phase, civilised phase, we should be able to say, this is our bottom threshold, this is our minimum threshold for human rights, that people should be able to claim that asylum. My problem with Rwanda, I'm not saying you support it, but my problem with it is that these people trying to claim asylum are immediately cut off. They're not even given the right to claim it here. So even genuine refugees will be turned away. And I can see why that is a problem for the ECHR. And I think, that we should be upholding those standards, especially if we're criticising human rights abuses all over the world, which we do.
Oh, well, you may have a view on that. GBviews at gbnews.com. Cindy, to the FT. The Netherlands is blocking sales of chip machines to China.
Yes.
What sort of chips
These
are we talking about?
These are not deep fat fryers.
Air fryers.
No, not those kinds of chips, but computer chips or phone chips, basically called semiconductors. These are tiny, tiny things that you couldn't really see with the naked eye, but are very important to everything that we use, from smartphones to kind of unmanned drones. Everything that we use in modern our life needs to have a semiconductor. And the more advanced they are, the smaller they are. And the Netherlands has this incredible company called ASML, which produces basically the machines that make these small chips. And this is all part of the US strategy to kind of contain China's development in this very, very advanced technological sector. There's a bit of an arms race going on at the moment.
Don't China have these machines of their own?
Not so advanced.
Gosh, really?
Yeah.
That's a surprise in itself.
Yeah. So China actually is... So the top chip makers in the world are Taiwan, South Korea, and China's good at making the slightly bigger versions, which are not going to cars rather than the most advanced machines. So by blocking the fact that they can't get this equipment, the Americans...
Limiting their growth in that field.
Exactly. And China probably will catch up at some point with its own domestic... Huawei is looking into making these chip machines. But for now, it certainly hobbles them. And it's interesting that the Netherlands, because this is a Dutch company, have so far resisted, because it would limit their own growth, it would limit their own contracts. But clearly American pressure has now won out here, so that the West is becoming more unified in kind of containing China on this technological front, which fascinating development. The national government is blocking its own company's sales.
Well, it's interesting. To The Guardian, Clarkson versus the Sussexes.
This is remarkable, I don't think you had to be a fan of what Jeremy Clarkson wrote in that article. It was pretty crass, but then again,
it's what you expect.
It's what you get from Jeremy Clarkson. He's made a career on Top Gear and other places of being rude, being bullish, saying what he thinks. Indeed, in this article, he not only sort of made the allusions to the Game of Thrones thing about shame and throwing excrement at people in the street, but also said some pretty unpleasant things about the former Duchess of Sussex. So, you in a sort of in a society which respects a free press, you're supposed to say, well, that wasn't a very nice article. Maybe I won't read that paper again. Maybe I won't read that guy again. Move on. But instead, we now have the Independent Press Standards Organisation, IPSO, not only coming in and demanding that the paper, The Sun, publishes an apology on its front page a front-page full statement explaining how its star columnists breach anti-discrimination rules, but also the way in which it talks about how it handled Clarkson is just so intensely arrogant and anti-press freedom. And here, quoted in The Guardian, it talks about the fact that we allow journalists to write mean-spirited or cruel pieces. But what we, and then goes on to say what we don't do is allow them to, Clarkson to write things like this. I think that should just raise the hackles of every journalist out there, or anybody who's aspiring to be a journalist, which is that, OK, most of us don't aspire to write hit pieces about, princesses or whatever, about the royals in cruel and personal ways. But once you have a press regulator coming in and saying that it has to police the tone or the niceness or the cruelty of an article, then that's a problem. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, they did not find any evidence, struck off the fact that it was racist.
Well, no, not racist, OK, but also the dismissed claims that it was inaccurate or harassed the Duchess. Now, I would have thought if you were going to say anything, you could say, well, it wasn't accurate, you consider there's maybe an element of harassment in there. I mean, I can see that as an argument more than it being sexist.
Yeah.
Actually.
Well, in order for it to be, I mean, the argument in favour of Clarkson says that if there's nothing explicitly racist or sexist in there, then you can't claim that it's racist or sexist. But what the argument was that by his kind of pursuit of Meghan, in the context of the, wider, I suppose, obsession with her among some members of the press, meant that it was perpetuating, it was a sort of emblematic, symptomatic of a sort of a wider problem with sexism and misogyny in relation to that individual Meghan Markle. And that's, as Clarkson and other people said, that's like sort of trying to read my mind. It's like suggesting that you think you know what I'm writing, rather than just taking what I've written on the page at face value. And the problem is, with free speech and freedom of the press, the people that you have to defend are always the most loathsome. They're always the ones that push the boundaries, that do the things that most of us don't do, that polite society sort of shrinks at. That's why it's important to defend them, because today it will be Jeremy Clarkson, tomorrow it will be someone else.
Yes, it's the old thing, isn't it? Is that I don't agree with what he said, but I defend his right to say it.
Yes.
And he didn't say anything inaccurate or wrong.
No.
It was just his
opinion.
Quite vile opinion.
Yeah.
But it was his opinion, and he's entitled to it.
Exactly.
And part of the Ipsos, argument is that he compared Meghan Markle to his hatred of Nicola Sturgeon and Rose West, the serial killer, and saying, well, what links those three women together? The fact that they're women. Well, actually, there are quite legitimate reasons to hate Rose West.
Yeah.
And Nicola Sturgeon is a deeply controversial figure. Yeah. So it could be that he simply is saying that he hates all of these people, not by virtue of their gender, but because they are in their own ways.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't think
he
that's a controversial
was trying
thing
to describe the ferocity of his hatred.
Yeah, and
saying, I hate her as much as her.
Exactly. I mean, it's bizarre to hate Meghan Markle that much, I personally think. But nevertheless, it is, as Ella says, kind of imagining how you can feel inside Jeremy Clarkson's head, which I'm sure, a lot of people think that they do know.
I don't imagine The Sun or Jeremy Clarkson are going to apologise in any way, are they?
So they've got a very small box on their front page.
On the front?
Which leads to page 17. I don't know if you've got it there, but it's about the least eye-catching, at the very bottom, Stephen.
Oh, yes. Jeremy Clarkson, Ipsos upholds complaint. See, I mean, it's very missable. It's underneath an advert for wine.
And the actual apology itself is incredibly dull and bland, so there's no pictures or anything. It's clearly not trying to draw attention to it at all. But I think they're appealing the decision. So I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, oh, well, fair enough. I mean, as I say, I don't really agree with that judgment.
No, I don't.
There you go.
Very few who will.
Cindy, Ella, thank you very much indeed. See you a little bit later on. Now, should we do some headlines?
There's a fly in here, sorry.
Sorry,
not me itching. There's this horrible fly here.
There is. Now, 45,000 police officers have been deployed across France in anticipation of a fourth night of civil unrest. Large events have been cancelled. We know buses and trams suspended nationwide, all following the death of a 17-year-old boy in Paris on Tuesday. And British holidaymakers have been told to be concerned about travel disruption if they are going to France.
And that's something that we're going to be discussing a bit later on in the programme.
The world's largest airline returning to Birmingham Airport. Emirates resuming the use of its 615-seater Airbus A380s from today. Most of them put into storage at the height of the pandemic. And they did wonder whether they'd ever come back again.
And new lower energy prices come into force today. The average price for a unit of electricity has been cut to 30p, whilst gas will drop to 8p a unit. Ofgem says it will save the average household over £400 a year on their energy bills. And people are being urged to actually get their meters read today and submit that meter reading.
Well, time for the showbiz news now. Stephanie Tetch is here. Good morning. It's a funny anniversary today. Diana, Princess of Wales, would have been 62.
She would have been 62 today. I always remember July the 1st as her birthday, and you can only imagine what it would be like if she was still alive.
I can't quite...
Yeah, you just can't... Sorry, there was a fly in front of me.
And it's really going for us.
You can't quite fathom. But every year there's the Diana Legacy Awards, which honours young people who are making a difference to the world, who are doing charity work. So that took place yesterday. But in front of the Express today, they're talking about, you know, the brothers should just bury the hatchet, and they couldn't be more further apart. Even at their Mother's Awards, which is a dedication to them, they both did, like, separate video speeches and dedications, so you can tell that relationship is still fractured, and I don't think they're trying to hide it anymore.
No, I mean, it's not surprising, is it, when one brother says terrible things about the other brother in a book to just try and make money. It's a very difficult thing to forgive and forget.
And it's quite sad because you can imagine if you've lost your mother, the best person who can help you through that grief is a fellow sibling, and they both went through that at a very young age, so I can imagine they've almost got this trauma bond. So even though they're at odds, they've had this bond, so it's quite sad that they're apart. But rumour has it that Prince Harry now, because they had the whole drama, Harry and Meghan with Netflix, and they're trying to hold on their, and they with Spotify, and so now they're trying to hold on their deal with Netflix, and apparently Harry will be going to Africa to shoot a documentary over there solo. Africa's always been a special place for him, so at the moment he's apparently working on a documentary with Netflix.
Oh, yeah, he does a lot in Lesotho, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
That's a bit more like it, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if Harry is going to make documentaries, they shouldn't be about his beefs with the royal family.
No.
They should be about causes that he's always been very, very passionate about.
Well, that's what's been the problem with Harry and Meghan, because they've done all the scandalous stuff now, and it's like, if you actually want to maintain a career in the limelight and you want to do documentaries, what are you going to do it about? And I think a lot of people are saying, oh, they're going through problems, but I think at the moment they're just trying to do things separately, like Meghan might want to get back into her acting, and Harry's going to have to pursue the charity route.
Yeah, well, it might be the right way forward. Stephanie, thank you very much indeed.
So much,
we'll
guys.
see you a little bit later on. We'll bring you all the top stories, including what could be a big difference to your energy bills from today. First, though, here's your weather.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your weekend weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Yes, it's a bit grey out there for many of us first thing, but it should get a bit brighter. Bright and breezy kind of sums up the weekend. There will be some showers, particularly across the north, close to this area of low pressure, and that will also generate some strong winds, especially tonight and tomorrow over northern Scotland. For most of us, as I say, just a bit of a breezy day. Yesterday's cloud and rain has been cleared away. It is fairly grey to start with this morning, a little bit of light rain and drizzle here and there, but that is petering out, and skies are generally brightening up with some sunny spells for most of us by lunchtime and through the afternoon. Now, one area it's likely to stay pretty wet, the far north of Scotland, especially Shetland, looks like having a fairly soggy day. Light winds here, but the wind's picking up across the northwest of Scotland, blowing in plenty of showers over the Highlands. The odd one for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, but many places across England and Wales will stay dry and bright. Temperatures high teens in the north, low 20s further south. If you're heading out this evening, again, most places will be dry, but take note across northern Scotland. Further showers to come in here, and the wind's just strengthening further, getting really quite gusty tonight and for tomorrow across a good part of Scotland. Still further outbreaks of rain to come over the Northern Isles and more showers to come into western Scotland. But otherwise, most of us having a dry night, a fresher night as well, not quite as humid as the night just gone. Temperatures down to about 11 to 14 Celsius. Sunday then, dry and bright for much of eastern England, southern England, the Midlands, Wales, sunny spells through the day. There will be more cloud at times for northwest England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland with some showers. Those showers pretty frequent in the northwest. Because it's so gusty, the showers will tend to zip through, so the weather chopping and changing quite a lot. Fairly gusty conditions though across Scotland. Could push some showers to the east coast, but I suspect most places here will be dry. Temperatures a little down on Saturday's values, high teens in the north, maybe 21 or 22 in the southeast.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of July. Today, energy bills finally fall as a new price cap comes into force. But is it enough to help you cope with the cost of living?
France rocked by riots. Hundreds are arrested as violence and looting continue for a 4th night, with British tourists now being warned not to travel to the country.
Beware of the horde of vampire horseflies that can bite through your clothes and rip into your skin. We'll find out how to avoid them and what to do if you're bitten.
And as always, we'll bring you the latest weather.
After the hottest tune on record, what do the first couple of days of July have in store? Well, bright and breezy kind of sums it up. But for more details, join me later for your full GB News weather forecast.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
We have to kick off with Mark in Manchester.
Hello, Mark.
Good morning. He says, I love you both. However, despite many emails, I never get a shout out. Well, you do now. Morning to you, Mark. He says, anyway, I'm on a prepayment meter. I got a lovely letter from Eon yesterday telling me how lucky I am. My unit cost per kilowatt hour was 32p, is now down to 29p. Don't think Mark's very impressed.
Seriously lucky.
I tell you what, though, it's just about 10%.
I know, and at least they wrote to you and told you. Tony says you can't treble the prices and then reduce them very slightly and say people are better off. The prices are still double what we used to have.
Yeah, well, it's a fair point. On giving up things and what to put in your... Weirdly, how that then transferred into what to put into porridge, because I've forgotten his name now. But
he likes Marmite.
Terry in Spain likes Marmite in his porridge, but he can't afford it anymore, so he's giving it up. Julie says you can't beat a dollop of marmalade in creamy porridge or a drizzle of mayonnaise.
In porridge? Mayonnaise? Does that make any sense to you?
No.
Mayonnaise in porridge?
No.
Wouldn't it go all gooey and separate or something? I don't know.
Mayonnaise is basically eggs and olive oil, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ooh, Julie.
What do you have in your porridge? That's what, clearly, we are... That's the talk of the town at the moment.
Yeah.
Talk of breakfast, anyway. So get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, mayonnaise, I can't imagine.
Yeah, but Marmite in porridge just gives me the...
But you see, I don't have mayonnaise anyway, in anything. Salad cream. If you're going to have, like, on salad...
Oh, I was going to say, not in porridge.
No, not in porridge, but good old-fashioned salad cream.
Salad cream's high in sugar.
Oh, it's high in fat, but you can get a lower-fat version.
Well, yeah, but that's never the same, is it? The lower-fat version is never the same.
No, it's all right. It's all right. But salad cream, because it goes on anything. Cold pizza the next morning.
Oh, I tell you what, I know we're going to talk about serious issues like the energy price cap and everything, but your comments about Elton John at Glastonbury have gone down a storm. I have to say, everybody writing in about this agrees with you.
I thought it may have been a bit controversial, I've got to be honest.
Well, you said it was just an old man at a piano who couldn't sing anymore.
Sorry, Elton.
And Dave in Worcester says he sounded like a pub singer and we couldn't even make out his words.
Jeremy said turned off after 3 songs. He could barely walk to his piano, never mind the singing.
Well, that's true. Karen says, Stephen, you're right, Elton was rubbish.
Patricia says he shambled onto the stage. I just thought he looked like a sick old man. Hasn't got the voice he had. He can still play the piano, though.
He can, yeah. I mean, same with Paul McCartney, Patricia says. His voice is totally gone. Well, I mean, he is 80.
Yeah, I mean,
But isn't it odd that Glastonbury did turn into a sort of festival of the oldies on stage? Still youngsters in the crowd, but oldies on stage. Matt in Reading says, I've got to agree with your Elton comment. I enjoyed Cat Stevens because that was a lesson in my musical listening history to my daughter. She and I love the same music and we often go to gigs. The one man and band who has not lost it, though, is Bruce Springsteen. At 70 plus, he has not lost it. And he did a 3.5-hour set when we went at Christmas to see him in Villa Park without a break. That's quite something, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Springsteen fan. But as I say, I don't think he's lost it. I don't know. I don't want to be critical of Elton, you know, but
because we all love Elton.
Yeah, I love Elton John.
But it did strike you that...
I don't know. I was just watching it and I was bored. I was just bored watching it and just thought... I couldn't work out what he was singing, half the words and...
Well, he can't sing in the same... Of course he can't. Who would expect him to? He can't get those high notes that he often used to do, and I don't know. But don't you often think the live version of what you've got to know very well from the album is often disappointing?
Oddly enough, Cliff Richard... I remember an interview with him, it might have been in his book years and years and years ago, but saying when he performs on stage, he likes to make it as close to the single as possible because that's what people know and love.
Yes, exactly.
Which is a fair point.
Anyway, if you agree or disagree with whether Elton was rubbish, and we really don't mean that personally, Elton, because we all love you, and we love your music, but it's just at Glastonbury, something was missing, wasn't it? Do get in touch, GBNews, no, GBviews@gbnews.com.
Now, families across Britain set for a boost to their budgets today, hopefully, with the average household energy bill falling by more than £400.
It's all due to a change to the energy price cap, which has come into force following a drop in wholesale prices.
Now, of course, that will come as a welcome relief to many of us struggling with the rising costs of living, but it's not all plain sailing, because bills are still almost double what they were before the energy crisis.
And that's what a lot of people have already been pointing out. Joining us now is Angela Knight, the former CEO of trade body Energy UK. A very good morning. Lovely to see you. Yes, a lot of people are pointing out that we are headlining it as a fall in prices, but actually the prices are still incredibly high anyway.
Well, I think you just said exactly what the situation is, that they're about twice what they were before we started on this particular crisis, and they're likely to stay there as well, because £2,000 as for an average household, which is that approximate calculation that's done on your gas and electricity, is not likely to get much lower. At the same time, it's not likely to get much higher either, because we have now found what I would refer to as a new steady state. There's still a shortage of gas around the world. There is still the big changes that we're making here in the UK with electricity, building much more renewables and, of course, more backup as well. And a lot of that cost sits on the bill. So it's very, very difficult to see why the bill should come down any further in the short term. At the same time, when you look at what is happening on the world prices of gas, so you're looking ahead next 6 months, 9 months or whatever, you can see that the gas price is unlikely to go up. So, yes, it's much better than it was, but this is a new steady state, and we're just going to have to get used to it, I'm afraid.
A lot of people may be very dismayed at the idea that you say, you know, what we're paying for now is the building of renewables. I mean, the whole point of renewables, as well as energy security, is meant to be bringing the price down, isn't it?
Well, actually, the answer to that question is no. The point of building renewables was in order to reduce our carbon footprint. And when the whole programme started, yes, it's absolutely right that the cost of building a wind farm was much higher than it is now. But every time you build a wind farm, you've also got to have the backup, because the wind doesn't blow all the time at a sufficient strength to generate electricity. I believe offshore runs at about 60%, for example, at best. So what that means is, unless you're prepared to go without electricity when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you've got to have backup. That backup, and the only one that you can bring in very quickly, is a gas-powered generator, so the gas-powered stations that we have across the country. I mean, one way of looking at renewables is you can say, on their own, they might be cheap, but once you've added in that backup, of course, for every unit of electricity, you've effectively got 2 units of production, and that's why they cost money overall. We also have to rebuild some of what I would call our base load, the stuff that carries on generating electricity regardless, of which the best base load is in fact nuclear, not necessarily those huge stations which cost fortunes and take 10 years or so to build, but the small-scale nuclear power stations that are now available, that you can actually get private investment in, because they cost $1-2 billion and they take about 2 years to produce and to build, and they are sort of a repetitive design. We need to get on with that as well.
Shouldn't we also be getting on with methods of storage?
Yes, you do have to do storage. The storage of electricity, though, is not the easiest of things, because although the whole battery techniques have improved dramatically, you can only store for a certain period of time. And if you're looking at storage for whole cities, well, you're in a completely different ball game. There will be long-term ability to use, for example, electricity when it's like in the summer and you've got the wind blowing and you use the electricity to crack water, electrolyze water, and then you store the hydrogen and then you turn that back into energy at a later date. But those are very long-term projects. I don't know what we'd be looking at for something sensible there, but probably 10, 15, 20 years, and probably would be doable in something like, you know, our big industrial areas, such as the conurbations for pharmaceuticals on the East Coast, Teesside and so on. For the use of domestic gas and electricity, the long-term having hydrogen replacing gas in the mains, or having heat pumps that work sufficiently in houses. Yes, it's there, but it's not a short-term proposition at all. We have to look at this as being renewables that we need, renewables that we need, baseload that we need, and something that can be started up quickly because you only get maybe an hour or two's notice that the wind's going to fall. And that combination is a combination which we haven't really had a proper strategic plan for. Even it's only improving now. And if we're going to do all that, you've also got to do something about the network, and particularly that is the big overhead cables. And people don't like that going through the countryside either. It is not an easy thing to do, reform our energy system. It's not a cheap thing, and we need to do it realistically, at a sensible timescale, and at a price that people are prepared and able to pay.
Angela Knight, good to see you. Thank you. It's not actually not a rosy picture there, is it?
No, and this is the new price that we're all going to have to put up with.
And it's the idea that we, as Angela Knight was saying there, we need a strategic plan, and we haven't had one. Why haven't we had one? I mean, why wasn't the one in place 20 years ago?
Yes, exactly. Well, we keep asking that about all sorts of areas, don't we? Like health and dentistry, that sort of thing.
I mean, this is what worries me, because that means there is no easy way out, and the best you can do, like we've seen with the NHS yesterday, is start it now. It says, like I said, you see, when's the best time to plant a tree? 10 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's what can you do? So we're just going to have to get on with it now. But it worries me that none of this has been thought of before.
It's very odd as well. I mean, a lot of people are pointing out, even absolute Tory supporters, that this government's been in for 13 years now. How come it's like now, in the last year of its life, you could argue, they're beginning to sort of address some of the issues that wouldn't it have been nice if they addressed 13 years ago?
Yeah, well, you can say the same about Labour, though.
I know, I'm not, absolutely. Yeah. And isn't that maybe the trouble with politics, the way we vote in a government that often stays in? I mean, how many prime ministers have we had in the last 13 years? But we vote in governments that only stay in for a short while, and then we accuse them of tinkering with things. And actually, that's all you can do if you're only in power for 4 years. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
You probably got a view on that one. gbviews at gbnews.com. You may have a solution, because often you come up with some very, very good ideas. Let us know.
Meanwhile, are you thinking of going to France? Were you thinking of going to France for your holidays? It's the second most favourite European destination for Brits, apparently, after Spain.
Right.
Going to France.
Easy to get to.
Yeah, and British tourists, of course, have been warned now about travelling to France because of the riots that grip the country at the moment.
Violence and looting have continued for a fourth night across the country. That follows a teenager being shot dead by police at a traffic stop.
Large events have been cancelled, curfews are in force, and buses and trams have been suspended nationwide.
Well, Charles-Henri Gallois is leader of the French Generation Frexit group, joins us now. Good to see you this morning. I mean, it's a hugely disturbing situation. How bad could this get?
No, I mean, it could worsen if we have other dead people. That really can happen. If you look at the picture, it's a riot with public buildings burning. So far the police is holding it well, but you never know. It's such a level of violence from the rioters that you can have someone shot dead, and maybe it could increase the riot. So it's a very worrying situation. And actually, of course, the police will do whatever it takes to take back order. But we need to think this issue at the long terms, because when you see the rioters, you can definitely know that they don't feel French. They have their own rules, their own moral, their own codes. So it's definitely an integration issue at the end, because the young man shot dead. I mean, it's a bad excuse for riots. When you look at the video, they are laughing while they are shooting buildings when they are stealing from the boutique. So it's really a bad excuse, and it's above all integration issue that we should address.
And we hear that, I mean, amongst the rioters is a very large amount of young kids, children, 14, 15-year-olds, who are going along and rioting because their social media platforms are almost encouraging them to do this. Do they even know what they're rioting about, do you think?
I don't think it's social media. I have seen Macron saying it's a video games issue. I think it's a ridiculous excuse, and it's an excuse to avoid take his responsibility, because what we are facing now is a mass immigration issue. If you host each year 500,000 people, you cannot integrate them. You have all the goodwill that you want. You will never integrate whole people. You will integrate some individuals, but you cannot integrate whole people. And when you host 500,000 per year, it's too much. And then there is another issue. It's let's say lax in judicial decision, because what you see is that all these people, they are attacking buildings, police, without any fear, because they know that every time there is an issue, because the prisons are full, the judge, the courts, they won't go to prison, or they will do 6 months at maximum, they will come back. So there is two issues of mass immigration and lax about the judicial system. If you know that you won't have any punishment, you will face it without any fear, and you will repeat it, and you will come back, and that's exactly what's happening. And you see that they are attacking the police without any fear, you know. So it's really.
Oh, apologies. We've lost Charles-Henri there, but we got the gist of what he was saying there.
Absolutely.
And look, and perhaps it's a legitimate point. You're looking at the migration issue and a lack of integration. You've got to ask, though, for a country that has a history of these sort of protests, is that then a legitimate excuse?
And we think we've got immigration issues that have to be addressed because of people getting into boats from France and coming here. But the issue is huge in France as well, because they're on the mainland of Europe.
Yeah.
And immigration is a massive thing, yes, in France. So anyway, will it put you off going to France this summer, I wonder?
Yeah, it would me.
Views at gbnews.uk. Well, I would be very worried about my family being able to walk along the street, and that's what we love doing when we go to France, isn't it? You love going to the outdoor cafes and
chewing on a baguette.
Yeah, and just enjoying the sort of French ambience, don't you? That's so different from our towns and cities. But you'd worry about walking in certain areas. And I don't think you know where these riots are going to pop up. They're all over the place.
No, they are. But hopefully, give it a week or two. Even that seems like a long time. Well,
President Macron is considering declaring a state of emergency.
I don't know how that...
It would mean
I don't know how it helps particularly.
No, I don't either.
I'm always slightly worried about that.
State of emergency means you get access to funds so you can line the streets with police all the time, and you can afford other ways of clamping down on people, I guess.
I did see a comment, so I can't find it earlier on, with someone saying, well, don't forget about all the riots that we've... Oh, here we go. Jane. Yes. Jane says, despite the monarchy, we've had many riots over the last few decades. The riots in London in 2011 were scary and lasted days. Well, that's true. However, you've got to say, haven't you, within all of this, we don't have riots to the scale that we see in France, or the frequency that you see in France.
I mean, the pictures we've been showing of the rioting in French streets is absolutely terrifying. It's because they set fire to cars, and it causes explosions, and they're throwing things as well. And I think it is quite terrifying.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll bring you more on that, of course, throughout the course of the day. But still to come, has the UK been more affected by the energy crisis than other countries? Well, the Labour Party says so. We'll talk to a shadow minister very shortly. This is GB News.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching. Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
.24 morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Now we're talking energy prices. Well, on the face of it, they're dropping today, but your bill will still be almost double what it was before the energy crisis.
Yeah, so it's still going to hurt, but just hurt slightly less, which in and of itself is a good thing. The Labour Party, though, says British households have been exposed to more energy shocks than other G7 countries because of the Conservatives' failure on energy policy.
Well, according to Labour, their analysis has found that since September 2021, bills for British families have risen by 62%, considerably more than in any other G7 country.
Let's talk to the Shadow International Trade Secretary, Nick Thomas-Simmons, who joins us now. Good morning to you. Why? What is happening with this? Why are we paying more than everybody else?
Well, firstly, very good to join you, as always, this morning. Well, as has been indicated, the position here in the UK, looking at the rise in energy prices in September 2021, is uniquely difficult. It's a 62% increase since then. It's the equivalent figure for Germany is 38%. For France, it's 28%. Now, why are we so uniquely exposed? It has to be the Conservatives' energy policy over 13 years. Just to give one example, the decision to ban, in effect, the development of onshore wind from 2015, we think has added around about £180 per year to bills. And that is a failure by the government to plan forward, despite warnings that they were given repeatedly at the time. So this government has to take responsibility for the particularly exposed position that Britain was left in when, of course, we had the war in Ukraine and the international situation that we've had.
So you think basically it's going back to over 13 years of Tory government, the lack of planning, I suppose. But, I mean, we didn't see, or did we, see Labour calling for more plans for energy security?
Well, no, that's not correct. We certainly have been calling out the government on their failure on renewables for many years indeed. So that point was repeatedly made. The issue here is that the government simply made decisions for short-term political reasons. And what we see is, and we see this situation, this short-termism, this failure across a number of sectors, not just the energy sector. I doubt we could name one public service in a better condition today in 2023 than it was when the government inherited it in 2010. We are really seeing now, coming home, the consequences of this 13 years of Conservative rule, and that's true in energy and it's true in other sectors as well.
Ed Miliband, the Shadow Climate and Net Zero Secretary, has said about this issue, Labour will bring down the cost of energy and cut bills by making Britain the clean energy superpower. Sounds great, except we've just been talking to Angela Knight, former CEO of Energy UK, and she said, well, yes, green energy, renewables, all good. It's not going to cost us any less.
Well, what we are going to do is have a mix of energy still available. We've got to make this transition to renewables. We're going to do it via not just GB Energy, a publicly owned company. We're going to do it by drawing in huge amounts of private sector investment as well. And it isn't just about trying to get people's bills down. We're going to insulate 19 million homes as well, which is vital for that. It's also about the issue of energy security, because we don't want to be in a position where the energy cost, the unit cost, is at the whims of dictators like Putin and others around the world. So it's absolutely vital we do this, not just for consumers, it's vital also for the jobs of the future and our energy security too.
Yeah, well, and that makes absolutely perfect sense. But what it doesn't do is answer Ed Miliband's claim that it will bring down the cost of energy. The experts in the field say no, it won't. And it's, I mean, it's what you just outlined there makes a lot of sense and sounds great. But then why is Ed Miliband selling it as it's all going to save us money, which of course is what will resonate with people?
Well, because if you've got additional sources of energy available to you coming onto the market domestically, you are obviously not going to be as exposed to world market shocks. But also, as I say, the pledge to insulate 19 million homes is going to bring bills down as well. I mean, it's a remarkable thing that we've got all these houses that are just energy inefficient, that if they were properly insulated, you actually would be able to use energy far more efficiently in those as well. And as I say, Stephen, this is so important. We're facing this acute cost of living crisis, these really high energy costs. It's vital that we take this action, not just for now, but for the medium and longer term too.
I think most people would agree with you that long-term planning is frankly what we all need, and we would have started, years ago. We should have done more long-term planning. Certainly when it comes to planning for energy security. Maybe expensive at first, though, mightn't it? I just wonder what you think of the long-term view of what Rishi Sunak was announcing yesterday to do with the National Health Service. At last, it sounds as though somebody is thinking far ahead, even if it's only going to take 15 years, and maybe even if he doesn't actually reap the benefits. What did you think?
Well, I read the first of the pledges, and it said about doubling the number of medical school places, which is lifted straight from the Labour policy that we've been arguing for months and months, up to a year ago. So this is a government, I think, that is out of ideas. But look, I'm not going to complain about the government choosing to take our idea shows and making the political weather. And actually, the NHS is crying out for staff. But as you say, Anne, the issue is, again, with this government, if you look at that NHS workforce plan, they are promising to have these things completed by 2031. Now, of course, I recognise it takes a number of years to train nurses, train doctors. But again, why on earth weren't they doing this years and years ago? We wouldn't have gone into the pandemic in such a weaker position as we did, with that lack of resilience. Well, again, we wouldn't be in the position that we are today.
Yeah, but with all of this, and look, it's not that it's not a valid question to ask, but you're never going to get an answer, are you? Because it's all about moving forward. I mean, we were talking to the Lib Dems yesterday, and they were saying, well, we've had 13 years of Tory rule and none of this was done. Well, for 5 years of it, they were in power alongside the Tories. So, I mean, it's all about looking forward, not backwards, isn't it?
It is about looking forward as well. Of course it is, Stephen. You've got to understand, though, why we are in the position we are in order to effectively put it right. But what I would say, and I think this is important in respect of this workforce plan, is I know how demoralised NHS staff at all levels are. We'll see the detail of this when the Health Secretary makes a statement about it on Monday. We'll see how quickly people are actually going to start the process of recruitment. I'd like to hear a lot more from the Health Secretary about retention as well, and his plans for dealing with that. But NHS staff can take it that the next Labour government, should we be privileged to come to office, will certainly want to continue with expanding the NHS workforce. And Vice-Chancellors up and down the country as well, looking at training places, can also be reassured about that, I would have hoped.
And just finally, dentists. We're going to be talking about this quite a lot in the programme. New dentists will be forced to devote years to the NHS to help tackle staff shortages. In other words, we help train them, we subsidise their training, and I think because of a Labour decision, actually, when you were last in government, they were allowed to, immediately they qualified, go private. That should be stopped, shouldn't it, now? And that would actually address the big dentistry problem straight away.
Well, you've got to address the problems as you find them at the time. I mean, the last Labour government, by the way, on the NHS, recruited something like 75,000 new nurses, 44,000 doctors. So they did great recruitment in our NHS. That's why satisfaction levels were so high in 2010. But in terms of the immediate position, we've got to look at this situation with regard to dentistry, because people up and down England are raising this issue. We'll look very carefully at the detail of what the government is suggesting, and obviously want to work with the profession as well. But you're absolutely right that we need to see this drastic action to try to get dentistry widely available to people once again.
Dick Thomas-Simmons, always good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. And do let us know what you think about the dentist idea. Apparently, dentists, I think I've got this right, dentists are trained, hugely subsidised by the National Health Service in their training, and as soon as they qualify at the moment, they can go private. I think some of them may want to do NHS work, but find that there is no place for them anywhere where they're NHS funded.
Like an apprenticeship, Eileen says if you serve an apprenticeship, you usually have to work for the company for at least 2 years after training to pay them back. Not literally pay them back, but, to make sure they're getting their money's worth out of you. Dentists should do the same to pay back for the NHS training. Perfectly sensible.
Yeah.
It's perfect, but then there's got to be the funding available so they can provide NHS dentistry.
It's one of our, I can't find our viewer at the moment, who said that they've been trying to get an appointment forever with their dentist, and it's driving them nuts. And they're worried, though, that if this works, it means that most of the dentists you get on the NHS are going to be newly qualified. But at least they'll be qualified.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a problem.
No, I don't.
I honestly think a lot of newly qualified dentists have new techniques, new skills.
Yep.
New
No, they know what they're doing. They're qualified. It's like people who tell doctors they're too young or something. They are qualified. They're good at their job.
Yeah,
Alistair
worry
says,
about that.
I moved into my house in Leicester several years ago and across the road is a dentist. I registered and all was fine. A month ago, I went over to book an appointment, but because I have good teeth and didn't use the dentist since registering, they took me off the list and didn't tell me. And now I have no dentist and I can't find one locally.
Well, that's the thing, Alistair, though I would say, because Ella Whelan was in the same boat.
Yeah.
But I think the issue with that is even if you have good teeth, you should still go and get a checkup once a year, which wouldn't cost a lot on the NHS. Oh, yes.
I wouldn't go near a dentist unless I'm in pain.
No, I go to the hygienist 4 times a year.
And swat a fly on your collar.
Go on, you feel free.
Well, it's on your collar. Oh, it's gone down your neck.
Oh.
We've got some very aggressive flies in the studio at the moment.
Honestly, they're not horse flies, though.
Oh,
We're
no,
going to talk about them. But these are like little fruit flies.
Yeah,
but there's no
they
fruit
buzz
in here.
around your face.
Yuck. But anyway, so you should go and get your teeth checked every year, and then you'd stay on the list.
I know. Well, that's the best reason, actually.
Yeah.
Go and visit the hygienist, I suppose, and get a checkup.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got the Saturday papers heading away very shortly with Ella Whelan, who doesn't go to the dentist, and Cindy Yu. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
8:40 morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Yeah, before we go through the papers, I just wonder how you're eating your porridge this morning.
Oh, yeah, loads
because
of
this
you
has
getting.
taken off, yeah. Will says a drop of whiskey is a good way to start the day with your porridge.
Yes, Helen is like me, salt.
Yeah.
Scottish way. And Bernard in Salford's the same, low salt or normal table salt. Leslie Ann is a busy woman. Says, my darling husband, David, has breakfast in bed every morning. Made by you, I guess, Leslie Ann. Porridge with raspberries, blueberries, sliced banana, drizzle of honey and a drinkable yoghurt poured over it.
It's quite a breakfast for you, isn't it? David
Yeah.
in Somerset, morning. David says, as I watch you from moist Somerset, I'm having porridge accompanied by my own homegrown raspberries and blueberries. Staggeringly good for you. And, of course, in these difficult times, free.
Yeah, I should say Paul, Michael and somebody else here I just saw talking about, Bob, peanut butter.
Yes,
in
that's
porridge.
big, apparently.
I can imagine that being quite nice.
And Steve in Birmingham says, prunes with my porridge regularly.
We'll be regularly after that. Let's go through the papers then with assistant editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu, and journalist and author Ella Whelan. Good morning to you. You like the sound of that, do you? You prunes. I don't think I've ever had a prune.
No, you only have to look at them and they put you off having them, but people swear by prunes, don't they? Oh, yes. Right, Cindy, then, Summer of Pink. We tell you. We can all look forward to a Barbie summer.
Barbie summer. Barbie's cool again. This comes as the new Barbie film is coming in the next 3 weeks. Very exciting. For people who don't know, it's actually a send-up of the Barbie brand. So if you've watched the trailer, it's actually pretty sarcastic. It's
And they're saying
satirising.
it's brilliant, aren't they?
Yes, and Greta Gerwig, who is an art house director, has directed this. So it's a smart take on the Barbie kind of tropes, and I'm really excited for it. But this is also a great way to revitalise for the toy maker Mattel, revitalise the brand, because, you know, Barbie's had so much problem with sexism and body image and all that sort of stuff in the last few years. Because it's a doll made in the 1950s, essentially.
And, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are quite surprised they allowed Barbie to be sent up in this way. But they're all for it because it's reviving the brand.
Exactly.
And then they can make more money out of it.
And we've already seen the impact of that. So Mattel, the toy maker, has signed deals with more than 100 brands, not just clothing, but also cosmetics, Airbnb, ice cream, rugs, scented candles, all of these, even Xbox consoles are coming out in Barbie branding. So all of
bright
this,
pink, presumably. We're going to
bright pink.
absolutely be flooded with pink.
Yeah,
we are, aren't we?
yeah, hot pink.
Well, there you
so
go.
it's a very smart commercial move from them, I think.
Yeah, and I was thinking back, we were talking in the break about whether or not we still would buy Barbies or play with Barbies. And I think one of the things about the more recent sort of additions to the brand where they've brought out sort of a normal-sized Barbie, you know, someone who a doll that actually looks like a woman rather than this bizarre kind of huge breasts, arched foot sort of character. And I think probably a lot of it, a lot of the adult conversation about Barbie misunderstands why children play with Barbie, which is that they don't think that this is a real woman walking along, but that it's part of make-believe. And so I've always thought a bit that there should be a kind of a relaxed attitude to the way in which children engage with make-believe and toys. So maybe this film will be a way to actually get adults to dial down the sort of panic.
Have you seen the trailer? I've seen a bit of the trailer where you talked about the arched foot. It's a raised foot. It's an impossibly raised foot, isn't it? And she walks like that throughout the movie, apparently.
Really?
Even when she takes shoes off, her feet are still like that, yeah.
Oh. And
She's
you really
almost
see
on toes.
You really see the ludicrousness of that through Margot Robbie doing that the whole time, whereas in a toy you might not see that, but it's like, you know, you're an actual woman, how can you... So then it satirises the idea that women can have feet like that.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
It looks as though it's probably going to be a very clever movie indeed.
Yeah. It wasn't on my list of things to see.
No, I
but
can imagine.
will be now.
But might have to be dragged along.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Ella, coffee. Is it healthy, says the Telegraph? Well, it's not coffee. It's this ultra-sweet...
Sugary coffee.
Yeah.
I thought I'd bring this back up because I just quite enjoyed your exchange with one of your guests, Olivia Parry, earlier. And, you know, thinking about the fact that, for example, you know, Belgian chocolate and hazelnut frappe cream I mean, by the time you've ordered that, you should know what's in it. By the time you said all those words, contains 44.5 grams of sugar, and the recommended maximum a day is 30. So that's pretty extreme. But these kind of the syrups, the creams, the chocolate flavours, whatever it is, when we are ordering it, I think most people understand that unless it's doing something very clever with, I don't know, aspartame or whatever, any of these sweeteners, there's going to be a hell of a lot of sugar in it. And we make a decision. And I suppose, the question is, how does a government react to a story like this? And Olivia Parry, your guest, said, well, there's a really big problem because this isn't covered by the sugar tax.
Well, the sugar tax hasn't worked anyway, has it?
Well, no, and also I would, maybe this is the sort of the anti-nanny stater in me coming out, but there is the idea that we should police via restrictions on deals or restrictions on prices or sort of manoeuvring people in a sort of nudge tactics to prevent people from making free choices about how much sugar, even whether they want to kill themselves with sugar by having one of these ludicrous drinks every day, says something about our approach to individual freedom and trust in people. Because I think most people are sensible enough to know that if you are having a caramel frappuccino every morning, you're going to have a big headache by lunchtime, but also it's not going to do very much for
your buzz straight away.
Yeah, but she did not like the idea of saying this should be personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Which...
Well, you have to, don't you? As you say, if you've just ordered that, you must know what's in it. It's your decision.
I think the one thing that the sugar tax has been good for is just having low sugar alternatives. I don't really go out to consume sugar. So if I were to have a Coke, let's say, or Iron Brew, which has been a victim of the sugar tax, I'm not saying I want to have loads of sugar. So if there's a low sugar version of Iron Brew, I'll just take that instead, if it tastes the same. So I think
apparently it tastes awful.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't actually drink Iron Brews. But so having that low sugar alternative, if manufacturers are made to kind of make those.
But they've always been there. Yes, yeah. I can tell you as a type 1 diabetic, they've always been there. It's just people didn't go for them.
Yeah.
So maybe it's nudged them in that direction. They taste. I mean, Iron Brew do an Iron Brew Extra now, which has got more flavour, no sugar.
Yeah. And then there's always the worry that sweeteners give you cancer, isn't there?
Well, there is.
Well, that is, yes.
That's the
World Health Organisation is going to warn us about that. But I mean, I live next to a corner shop, and when the kids are waiting to get on the school bus every morning, they go into the corner shop and they're buying very high sugar drinks,
like energy drinks and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that's a way to start the day. Maybe that's their breakfast.
We all did that. I remember, the first time you got I really remember the first time being able to buy your own food in secondary school, at break times and things like that, and just everybody going for the crap because you're just stupid because you're 12 or 13 and you don't make sensible decisions about a balanced diet throughout the day. But, there is a question about obesity. I think we should take that seriously. But we've also forgotten that when you're that age, you burn it off a lot quicker than you do when you get to 30 and 40. And so actually there's a kind of resilience, particularly within young people, consuming these kind of things that it only takes a few laps around the playground and it's sort of all right again. And I think we should be a bit more relaxed.
I bet you the dentists would have a view on drinking high sugar drinks because that's got of going around your,
especially
around
if
your mouth.
Fizzy and carbonated, where it kind of bubbles into your cavities, which is not great.
Should we give ourselves something to get really wound up about, just to finish off? In the Times, Cindy, water firm chiefs living in the lap of luxury.
Yeah, this really wound me up, actually. So these are the executives of the Macquarie Investment Asset Management Company, which owned Thames Water until 2017. So it's important to say they're not the current owners, but it is under them that so much of this £14 billion of debt was built up in Thames Water. And it turns out the chiefs of this company have been living in multi-million-pound houses in the UK, Martin Stanley was paid £10 million in the year that he steps down. All of this while dividends during their reign at Thames Water ramped up to around £3 billion, while they were racking up more than £10 billion of debt in the company.
How do you get to be the chief executive?
I know.
Crumbs. I wonder what sort of background they have to have.
Well, but they're investment managers. That's what they are.
That's what they are.
That's what
hedge fund type people.
Exactly. So they're not water people. They're investment managers. They're trying to squeeze as much money out of it as possible. And I guess in some industries, if there was competition, you would say one of the ways to drive up profits is to drive up your competency, your quality of delivery of service, or drive down prices. But I guess because it's water, you have to use Thames water. You can't choose between
No, you have to have
companies.
water, don't you?
Yeah. So there's a natural monopoly here, which they've clearly taken advantage of. And this company was known as the vampire kangaroo by Australian press. So you can kind of
vampire kangaroo.
Yeah, the vampire kangaroo.
Yeah.
so they're known. They have a bad reputation for basically sucking capital out of companies that they take hold of.
Oh well, there you go.
When I grow up, I want to be a water company CEO.
Do you? Roll about in the cash. You can bathe in
Fill my
cash.
swimming pool, absolutely.
Yeah. Ella, Cindy, thank you both very much indeed. Been good to see you.
And now shall we move on to something that's truly going to make you itch and scratch?
Yeah, well...
Swat.
Sort of. Horseflies, right? Because, I mean, up from the north, we've got horseflies all the time. Not a new thing, but down here, you don't really seem to...
Why would they be north-south divided?
I don't know. It's just, well, he's lived in the country. There was cattle and horses and all
we
that
have
sort of
country
thing.
down here.
So we always saw loads of horseflies. But anyway, we're all being warned to look out for horseflies now because they are big. But apparently they're using very strange language, saying things like they can tear flesh apart.
And bite through your clothes.
I mean, it's a bit scaremongering,
Well,
isn't it?
apparently the number of them is on the rise, with hot weather and thunderstorms being... We always blame the weather, don't we, for creating what apparently is a perfect environment for them at the moment.
Yes. Let's talk to the technical officer for British Pest Control, John Horsey, who joins us now. Morning, John. I mean, I know they can be a bit nasty, but are we over-panicking about horseflies?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things at this time of year where they start to come out more often. People are seeing them more. They're getting out into the countryside more. So you're just coming about them, more in your day-to-day life. Do we need to panic? No, not really. We don't get waves of insects like in one go. We just seem to get them as a drop in. There are a number of reasons why it may be more insects around this time of year, especially with the warmer weather we've had. We've not really had that cold spell like we did last year. So yeah, maybe there's just more around because of the climate that we're currently having right now.
How do we get rid of them if we have got a problem?
Yeah, it's one of the difficult ones. It's not one you can get rid of, very easily because they're living in sort of marshlands, wetlands, damp forests. So actually being able to get rid of them is quite difficult. It's more about just managing, your clothing and things when you're in areas where it's likely to have horsefly problems.
Do we panic a bit more just because they're bigger? I mean, our strap on the screen says, for those on the radio, warnings over a rise in fanged horseflies. I mean, they're just big flies, aren't they?
Yeah, so they are bigger, probably twice the size of a housefly, up to maybe 20 mil in size, but they can have a wingspan of up to sort of 45 mil as well. So they are a big fly. A majority of them are silent flyers, so you won't know they're actually coming until, they've already sort of started to feed on you or have already fed on you.
You can see that if they've horrible. You can see that we probably just had a period of the right sort of weather for them. Will they last long? Will they last all summer, or do they have a moment in time and they'll be off?
This particular part of the year is normally more common. Later in the year, we have other flies that tend to start to show again that feed in a similar way. But just this time of year, because we're getting out more, we seem to see them more often. They will be around all summer, and they'll overwinter as a larval stage. So, the adults will be, flying around quite a bit.
For a bit to come. John, good to see you this morning. Thank you. I mean, if you do get bitten by a horsefly, you are going to get a big lump. A big itchy lump. It's not, I was bitten as a kid by horseflies all the time. But you will get a nasty.
But I do hate the way the papers sometimes play this up. So they can put a big scary picture in the newspaper saying there's a new wave of this particular insect. I particularly hate it when they do it with spiders and things like that. But I don't think it's that huge a problem for us.
Don't panic. Buy yourself a fly swatter.
Yeah.
Anyway, coming up, how will the energy price cap, the new one today, the lower one, affect your bills? We'll tell you more after the weather.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your weekend weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Yes, it's a bit grey out there for many of us first thing, but it should get a bit brighter. Bright and breezy kind of sums up the weekend. There will be some showers, particularly across the north, close to this area of low pressure, and that will also generate some strong winds, especially tonight and tomorrow over northern Scotland. For most of us, as I say, just a bit of a breezy day. Yesterday's cloud and rain has been cleared away. It is fairly grey to start with this morning, and a little bit of light rain and drizzle here and there, but that is petering out And skies are generally brightening up with some sunny spells for most of us by lunchtime and through the afternoon. Now, one area it's likely to stay pretty wet, the far north of Scotland, especially Shetland looks like having a fairly soggy day. Light winds here, but the wind's picking up across the northwest of Scotland, blowing in plenty of showers over the Highlands. The odd one for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, but many places across England and Wales will stay dry and bright. Temperatures high teens in the north, low 20s further south. If you're heading out this evening, again, most places will be dry, but take note across northern Scotland. Further showers to come in here, and the wind's just strengthening further, getting really quite gusty tonight and for tomorrow across a good part of Scotland. Still further outbreaks of rain to come over the Northern Isles and more showers to come into western Scotland. But otherwise, most of us having a dry night, a fresher night as well, not quite as humid as the night just gone. Temperatures down to about 11 to 14 Celsius. Sunday then, dry and bright for much of eastern England, southern England, the Midlands, Wales, sunny spells through the day. There will be more cloud at times for northwest England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland with some showers. Those showers pretty frequent in the northwest. Because it's so gusty, the showers will tend to zip through, so the weather chopping and changing quite a lot. Fairly gusty conditions though across Scotland. Could push some showers to the east coast, but I suspect most places here will be dry. Temperatures a little down on Saturday's values, high teens in the north, maybe 21 or 22 in the southeast.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of July. Today, energy bills finally fall as a new price cap comes into force. But is it enough to help you cope with the cost of living?
France rocked by riots. Hundreds arrested as violence and looting continue for a fourth night, with British tourists now being warned not to travel to the country.
Aberdeen celebrates our armed forces. More than 1,000 serving and veteran military personnel taking part in an Armed Forces Day parade.
And as always, we'll bring you the very latest weather.
After the hottest tune on record, what do the first couple of days of July have in store? Well, bright and breezy kind of sums it up. But for more details, join me later for your full GB News weather forecast.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Some of you are right fancy out there, can I just say, having your breakfast this morning. David's in Stockholm, so maybe things are a bit fancy in Stockholm. He says, we enjoy our porridge with apple compote, marzipan and sliced almonds, or almonds, depending on where you're from.
I understand the apple. Marzipan.
What's an apple compote?
Well, it's like just an apple, puree.
Oh, I see.
I think. Isn't it? It is, yes. And it would melt nicely in the porridge if the porridge is hot. Richard and Carol have organic jumbo oats made with 50% milk, 50% water, then mixed with ground cinnamon, mixed seeds, chia seeds, almond nuts, blueberries, blackberries and maple syrup. Very healthy and delicious.
Oh.
I must say, everything you're mixing with your porridge makes porridge sound much more appealing.
See, I just like porridge on its own. A bit of sprinkle of salt and that's it.
Mm.
The problem with all these things, they'll like seeds and things, lovely as they are and healthy for you in some ways, but they do contain a lot of fat.
Yeah, but they're lovely.
But they are, I do.
We are now getting in some emails about people who disagree with you about Elton.
Oh, right. No, good. That's good.
Because, earlier on, you were saying it was just an old man playing a piano and not singing very well. And a lot of people were agreeing with Stephen on that.
I mean, I like Elton, but it was just, I found it really disappointing.
Anne in Preston says, I have to disagree with you about Elton. He was amazing. It was an absolutely wonderful set. Yes, he had trouble walking. Having a new hip does that to you. I loved every minute. And we must also mention Rick Astley, what a star, and Cat Stevens, both amazing.
Yeah, Ginny says some of the negative comments you shared about Elton John were way off the mark. The fact that he had the largest audience ever says it all. Well, good.
Well, it did go down well, there's no doubt. It went down incredibly well with the crowd.
I mean, maybe it sounds better
when you're there. It might
and it just doesn't come across the same.
And you've got the atmosphere then, as well.
Yeah, you've got the atmosphere.
Which is never quite caught by television, no matter how well you do it.
But no, I like you disagreeing with me on that one. It's purely a personal opinion. I thought it might have been a really great set and I just didn't enjoy it.
Mm.
So,
no, but I'm like
each to their own.
I think the live version is... maybe when you're there it's different, because I've been to see some of the big old stars, and when you see them live, you are so caught up in the atmosphere. I don't think you worry about the quality of the sound particularly, but you do when you're sitting at home watching it on the telly.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Maybe.
Rod Stewart, fantastic live.
Is it, you say I'm not a Rod Stewart fan?
No, not me particularly. I was working, but I found myself in the crowd. And Tom Jones, again, not a particular Tom Jones fan, but my goodness, watching him live is unbelievable.
Some people can really carry it off, though. A Deacon Blue I saw years ago, amazing. But more recently, if you're at the younger end of the market, I saw a band called The Vamps, they're huge amongst the youth of today.
Well, very young and trendy.
Very young and trendy. Well, I took my niece to see them in Manchester. And I tell you what, those boys can perform.
Yeah.
You know, it was like a really good set. They actually sort of performed, if you know what I mean. And they were brilliant live. Really, really good. I was really impressed. Apart from the fact I was surrounded by screaming teenage girls.
Good Lord.
So you had to, honestly...
It must have been wonderful in those screaming days to have gone and seen the Beatles live.
But do you know what? It reminded me a bit of that. Not that I was around for that.
The kids just were screaming. They couldn't hear the music because they were just screaming.
They just literally stand there and scream all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't you just listen to the music
because
quietly?
It's the excitement of being there, isn't it? It really must be.
Used to there, or as long as they have a good
Anyone
time.
watching who ever went to a Beatles concert? That would have been fantastic, I think.
If you were one of those screaming girls at the airport and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
My sister was. My sister was a screaming girl.
Was she?
It wasn't at the airport. It was. They were playing in Worcester, and we lived in Malvern at the time, which is just about 8 miles away. And unbeknownst to most, they were staying in a hotel in Malvern that night. And my sister got to know, and went to meet them at the hotel.
And screamed.
And screamed. Yeah.
Which sister is this? Name and shame, please.
That's Sue.
Sue.
If you're watching, Sue.
You're a disgrace.
And apparently they
Sue.
were in the hotel rooms at the top. And the girls were underneath, at the bottom of the hotel, screaming. And they came to the window, and then they just started throwing out anything, toothbrushes. So they all had things. And then they met them afterwards and did all the autographs.
Yeah, right. Well,
she'll never forget that night, I think, ever.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Memories, isn't it? Memories.
Yeah, wonderful.
Anyway, hopefully,
excitement, isn't it?
I don't know if today will stand out in your memory as the big day prices came down, because it's not going to be that significant. However, it is positive news. Families across Britain will get a bit of a boost to the budget today. The average household energy bill falling by about £400.
Yeah, it's all because of a change to the energy price cap, which has come into force following the drop in wholesale prices.
So a welcome relief for consumers, but bills, just to remind you, still about double what they were before the energy crisis.
Well, we're joined in the studio by GB News' political reporter, Catherine Foster. And yes, it's a good headline for the Tories today. How much substance there is to it. People are already getting in touch saying, yeah, but, the bills are still twice what they were.
Well, it's a good headline for the Conservatives, and goodness knows they need them at the moment, because we all know, don't we, that prices seem to go up and up and up. So we finally got an example of something coming down, and quite significantly so. The average household, I think it's about 27 million households, will be paying £400 less over the next year than they would otherwise have done. But as you say, prices are still almost double what they were before Russia invaded Ukraine. So we're paying a fair bit less, but we're still paying far, far more than we were only a couple of years ago. Yeah,
there is some positive news, because some people are saying, well, my bills are only going down by 10%. Well, that means they weren't paying up to the level of the price cap before, which is good. So, I mean, although the price cap is 2,076 or something like that, isn't it? We may well be paying less than the price cap, which is how it was always meant to be.
Yes, because it's a 2,070 pounds or whatever. That's for a sort of average household. But, of course, if you use a lot less, you'll pay a lot less. If you've got a 7-bedroom house and heating a swimming pool, you're going to pay a lot more. So it is an average. But if you're paying by direct debit, you can expect those to fall. Mine's just gone down by about £35. What I would say is, if you haven't got a smart meter, or even if you have and you want to be sure, do submit meter readings for your gas and electric today, and that will guarantee that as of those readings being filed, you will then get the lower price going forward.
Now, we were talking about this earlier, and Labour are saying that energy bills for British consumers have risen by 62%, considerably more than in any other G7 country. Do you think that's true?
That's quite shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, they do seem to have the figures. So, yes, and I think what this speaks to really is the fact that not just the Conservative government, but successive governments going back a long time have not really prioritised energy security. We just assumed for a long time that we can get whatever we want from wherever we want, whenever we want it. Of course, we found out with COVID and PPE, etc., that wasn't the case. And now we found with Russia invading Ukraine. But I think lots of governments didn't put the thought in to energy security. And obviously, we've got lots of Tory wrangling about onshore wind, and Labour weren't very keen on having nuclear power. And Nick Clegg, of course, the deputy PM in the coalition, famously said in about 2010, well, the trouble with nuclear power is that, it takes 10 years to get a new nuclear power built. And a lack of forward thinking and a lack of long-term planning. And unfortunately, that's what governments too often do. They're stuck in an electoral cycle. They think, what can we do to make a difference in 2, 3, 4 years for the next election? And stuff that's really, really important, but that takes many years, is neglected.
Which is why it's interesting with the NHS plan unveiled yesterday. It's a 15-year plan. Again, we're not going to see any immediate benefit. We won't see any benefit at all for 3, 4 or 5 years. But the fact that that has been put in place yesterday, I mean, there's the argument it should have been done decades ago. It's too late now, isn't it? But at least that is a long-term strategy we are seeing put in place. We need something similar with energy now.
It is. And in the case of the NHS plan, sure, we've had lots of NHS plans before, but this is the first long-term, 15-year, as you say, workforce plan. And that is significant. Now, unfortunately for Rishi Sunak, it's very unlikely to show any real benefits that we can see and feel before the next election. So the Conservatives may ultimately not get the credit for it. And of course, Labour are saying, well, you've pinched our plan. And the Lib Dems are saying, well, what took you so long? But clearly, we do need a huge investment in staffing. We're taking lots of doctors and nurses from abroad, often from countries that can ill afford to lose them. We're not giving our own kids leaving with straight A's places in medical schools. So this is positive
Well,
news.
that's it. It's made sense to everybody we've spoken to.
It does make sense. And it's very unusual that an announcement lands pretty much universally well. Of course, there's a bit of criticism here and there. And I think one thing that's missing, hopefully the government will remember Boris Johnson saying they were going to fix social care once and for all, because, of course, without a similar plan for social care, you've got large numbers of elderly people sitting in hospitals who don't want to be there but can't be discharged, and that's hugely expensive for the NHS. But broadly positive, funded by $2.4 billion over the next 5 years. But, of course, there's immediate challenges, aren't there? Because waiting lists that Rishi Sunak's pledged to bring down are at a record high of 7.4 million. And we've got these junior doctors' strikes, 5 days of strikes in July, which is unprecedented. And now the consultants voting to strike as well. And the government sounding like they may not honour the recommendations from the independent pay review bodies, who may say 6 or 6.5%. So difficult to see how they resolve these strikes.
Yeah, well, one step at a time, Catherine.
Well, one hopes, yeah. I mean, the
the
long-term 15-year plan is very impressive to look at, but there are more cutting, urgent things happening now, aren't there? We need action on those too.
We do. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. Now, let's turn our attention to the other side of the channel, should we? Because if you're a tourist and you're thinking about going to France, well, you're being warned against it as riots grip the country.
Yes, there's been violence and looting, and that's continued now for a fourth night across the country after the teenager that we've all heard about was fatally shot by police at a traffic stop.
Well, large events have been cancelled, so we're told. Some curfews are in force. There could be more put in force over the weekend, and buses and trams suspended nationwide.
Well, let's now talk to French-Algerian journalist and author Nabila Ramdani, who joins us now from Paris. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
It must be heartbreaking at the moment for you, living in Paris, which such a beautiful city, with such huge problems, actually not just in Paris, but all over the country. Is it a terrible atmosphere at the moment?
Yes, absolutely, and you're absolutely spot on. You know, the city of light, love and laughter is anything but at the moment. And as you mentioned, there was, again, huge rioting overnight and in all cities across France, despite curfews being imposed from 9 p.m. The Interior Minister is updating the figures all the time. But the latest is almost 1,000 arrests last night alone. And an interesting statistic is that of the arrests so far since Tuesday night, the average age of those arrested is between 17 and 19. So these are very youthful riots, and it's almost a youthful way for French citizens who are rebelling against the system. And I have to say that a lot of the rioters have the same profile as Nahel Merzouk. They have an African background and they complain about persistent discrimination and indeed about police violence. But one thing that is very worrying is that criminals are getting involved in the riots. They're involved in acts of looting. There was a huge amount of looting happening overnight in big cities like Paris and Marseille. And yes, they were chanting justice for Nahel, but beyond that, there were gangs of criminals involved. And there is no doubt that there's a lot of anger in France about what's happened to Nahel. But as you know, France is a protest nation. It was built on revolutions. I mean, the big defining one, 1789, comes to mind. But this tradition carried on through violent protests, including the Yellow Vests one and the more recent pension reform protests, for example, with elements determined to cause a huge amount of damage. So it's quite right that people should be on the street and expressing their anger, but the kind of criminality that we're seeing playing out as well is clearly something that is inflaming the situation. But I'll tell you something else that is also inflaming the situation and that is not helpful is when you have a police union describing the rioters as hordes of savages and indeed vermin. Now, this is just a kind of inflammatory and, dare I say, colonial language that sums up the divide in France at the moment between a reactionary establishment backed up by a hugely powerful security state, including many paramilitaries, and lots of people from ethnic minority backgrounds who feels as though they are discriminated against in every aspect of their lives and who are not given opportunities and who are being treated like second-class citizens.
So Nabila, how much of this is about a lack of integration? Now, whether you, depending on which side you see that from, but a lack of integration of what is very large swathes of sort of migrant communities within France, not feeling as though they are, in effect, part of the system.
Yes, absolutely. There's a huge, very large section of the population that feels as though they are still treated like colonial subjects. Now, of course, Nahel is from an Algerian background, and this has exposed the treatment of similar French citizens by the French state. There have been tensions between Algerian communities and the French police going right back to the days when Algeria was a French colony. Algeria won a very savage war of independence, which ended in 1962. But this has caused huge anger and grievance among millions of French nationalists who wanted to hang on to Algeria. And dare I say, the city of Nanterre has particular historical resonance because it was the site of the biggest shanty towns in France in the 1950s and in the 1960s, which was filled with up to 10,000 migrant workers from mainly Algeria, and who were literally parked there with no running water or electricity. And most of the men who lived there were viewed by the French state as the enemy within. They were branded insurgents, they were subjected to extrajudicial killing and wounding. And this has characterized the way, the reputation, sealed, dare I say, the reputation of a notoriously barbaric police force. And this has reached a low point in October 1961, when up to 300 Algerians were murdered in central Paris. Many of them were thrown off bridges and were left to drown in the River Seine. So times has moved on, of course, but these shanty towns have developed into the council estates that we see today. And the descendants of these migrant workers now live there. And they still, a lot of the anger that we see today is affecting by this legacy. The febrile atmosphere that we see today is absolutely informed by past events such as those.
What can President Macron do to quell this problem?
Well, there are the short-term and the long-term solutions, like in all problems. And at the moment, President Macron sees these riots as very much a law and order problem. He's already sent out 45,000 extra police. He's even resorting to drone technology, helicopters, armed vehicles. He's disrupting social media networks, his intelligence forces, of course. The idea is to prevent people from gathering and basically getting out and coordinating action to cause a lot of damage. But one has to bear in mind that the police that Macron is sending out, they are not just beat policemen. They are highly trained riot officers wearing body armor and carrying an assortment of weapons ranging from machine guns to baton and tear gas. It has to be noted that tear gas is a chemical weapon that is banned in war zones by all international treaties, but it is used indiscriminately against civilian populations in France. So these are not the kind of community police personnel that you might think should become involved in a crisis like this. And what I certainly noticed is when these extremely intimidating paramilitaries turn up and then they start hitting everybody while gassing them effectively, the situation gets far, far worse. So the great balancing act which the French authorities have to play here is effectively between conceding that an agent of the state, a serving police officer, has killed a very young French citizen, while also having to show faith in their police forces. And it has been argued that the reactionary strategy of the Emmanuel Macron administration is in fact exacerbating the problems. But I think in the long term, there has to be some reform within the police. Yesterday only, the United Nations has expressed huge concern at institutional racism within the French police. France's own anti-discrimination body has a number of times found that if you are from a black or an Arab background, you are 20 times more likely to be stopped and searched. So in the long term, there has to be policies that bring ethnic minorities who are currently stuck on those green housing estates, to bring them back into the mainstream society and give them the opportunities they deserve, like the rest of the French population, and being treated equally. And effectively, France has to live up to its own Republican ideals and apply liberty, equality, fraternity to all of its citizens.
Nabila Ramdani, we've got to leave it there, but really good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. It comes to something when France, which is, as you say, just across the channel, and it's the second most favourite holiday destination for us Brits, apparently. So easy to get to now. It seems terrible that suddenly now we've got a warning advising British tourists
don't
to think,
go.
Really not, don't go.
Yeah.
And you can see how dangerous it is in many places at the moment.
I'll tell you what's worth checking, actually. If you sort of think, no, it'll be fine, I'm going to go, it's going to be fine, check your travel insurance is going to cover you.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, because when there's been a warning like that, sometimes it invalidates travel insurance. So it might be worth just, if you are going, ring your travel insurance just to check that you are still covered. Just bear it in mind.
Yeah, well thought.
Plenty more still to come, including we're joining the Aberdeen Armed Forces Parade a week later, fortnight later from our own Armed Forces Day. Why is it different? We'll find out in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
(9:26), very good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Have you ever been to Aberdeen?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I thought you were going to do that in a Scottish accent then.
Well,
No,
I haven't. I've never been as far north as Aberdeen, no.
It's lovely, the Granite City. It's a bit of a great place. It's great, though. You can see dolphins and seals off the coast.
It's the oil rig city as well now, isn't it?
It is
the
now,
centre of Scotland's oil.
It's a long time since I've been up there, but it is so beautiful. And it is it's a heck of a long way up. You do really feel it when you realise it's a long way.
Northern Lights in Aberdeen, can't you?
Oh, yeah. Anyway, the good people of Aberdeen are putting on quite a show today for the troops.
Yeah, the city's hosting their annual Armed Forces Day parade, celebrating our heroes with an array of local pipe bands, as you can imagine, and vintage military vehicles.
It should be quite something to behold. Our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, is up there ready for... Oh, and in some prestigious company, Tony.
Indeed, good morning. I am joined this morning by Lord Lieutenant David Cameron for today only, and who normally serves as Lord Provost of the beautiful city of Aberdeen. And indeed, as you say, today is a day of much celebration in the city centre for the Armed Forces Day parade. Lord Provost, Lord Lieutenant, thank you for joining me this morning. Tell me about what we can expect over the course of today in terms of festivities.
OK, over the course of today, the main thing obviously is a parade down Union Street. There will be serving personnel, there will be veterans, there will be cadets, there will be the Officer Training Corps from the university, there will be reservists, and there's always a group of veterans on motorbikes, which is quite exciting to see. You know, the sort of motorbikers are given a bad press, but these guys are so proud to have served their Queen and country in their case, and you know, moving forward the King, that it's colourful, it's exciting, and I get the pleasure of the salute at the end as they all go past.
phenomenal. I mean, I was going to ask about the kind of the colour and the excitement, and you know, obviously, I imagine you talk to quite a lot of locals around Aberdeen, and what kind of the excitement levels are like. We had a wee splash of rain, as you might expect, of course, but that's not going to put people off today, is it? What is it that makes this particular event so special in the Armed Forces calendar?
I suppose the special thing for us, we do a couple of things. We have a primary school competition to design a flag for the day, and the winner, these flags are made into hand flags that will be handed out to the people who will line Union Street to watch the procession. And I had the pleasure last week with my wife, Lady Provost, to go to the primary school where the winner was to present her prize to her. And what was most fascinating about that was the class knew somebody was coming in. They didn't know why. The girl who had won the prize didn't know. And it was just a lovely morning with them where they could see what this was all about. And I put my Lord Lieutenant's uniform on that day just to add a little to the occasion.
Well, it's quite a spectacular uniform, and I think we're imagining quite a lot of glitz and glory, and some of the vehicles and the troops going by with their pipes and drums. And just, I guess, lastly, there's quite a special relationship between the military in the North East and the royal family. Can you just tell us a wee bit about that?
Okay, obviously the strongest military connection is the fact that we were the home of the Gordon Highlanders, and we still have an active barracks, and in the barracks we have reservists as well as cadets, a very wide range of these. And for example, I, as you say, I'm the Lord Lieutenant today. The reason I'm the Lord Lieutenant is in 1899 Queen Victoria decreed that we would be the county of the city of Aberdeen, and it's counties that have Lord Lieutenants. So that is when the Lord Provost subsequently became also the Lord Lieutenant of the city. Otherwise, it's counties.
Fantastic. Well, we'll definitely look forward to seeing you make the salute later on today. The parade today runs from 11 through till 12:30, and we'll be definitely sending you some great colourful pictures, hopefully slightly drier pictures, as the day progresses.
Lovely. Tony, thank you very much indeed, and our thanks to the Lord Lieutenant as well, who, do you know what, don't take this the wrong way. Oh. I love it when you have people in that position who are of an older generation, because they have, you can tell he's got the experience, the background, the knowledge, and I also think it's very nice that he will be taking the salute, which is an act of tremendous respect. And I always like it when someone of an age gets that respect.
You can see how much it means to them in their face, can't you?
Wonderful. Love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Have a great day in Aberdeen. Let's hope the rain holds off for you.
Yeah, if you're heading there today, let us know. And if you're having your very Scottish porridge, the only way to do it is put salt in it, says Helen.
Oh. Andy in Nottingham says, I just tried honey in my coffee. Great.
Oh, yeah. No,
and Philip says, I have a banana, a teaspoon of brown sugar, cinnamon and nutmeg. That sounds nice.
See, it's not very healthy, all of that.
No, but it's nice, isn't it?
Oh, it's nice.
No, but it's nice.
It's nice, yeah. Well, yeah. I'm trying to be very, very healthy at the moment, though it's not necessarily working.
Anyway, it was the 1st of July today, and my beginning of the month resolution is to try another diet, and that's what I'm doing.
And what have you had this morning?
A bar of chocolate. Only a little one.
It's only a little Freddo.
Yeah. It was a sort of celebration.
Oh.
So I've decided I'm not going to completely cut out things like that. I will just reduce them.
Oh, right, OK.
That'll last till 6 o'clock tonight, I can tell you.
It's hard when you do these shifts.
And you get so hungry.
You get hungry because you're tired.
Yeah, but you should have something sensible then.
Yeah.
Not a bar of chocolate.
You should. I did it yesterday. I had a big bag of crisps yesterday, which is not healthy.
I love a bag of crisps.
There you go. It's
talk about food.
No,
it's really dangerous to talk about food.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but coming up next, we're looking at pressures facing food production here in the UK. This is GB News.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB Newsers, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 9:37. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Now, the pressure facing food production is now more real than ever. Continuing challenges like green and financial issues are putting farms right under the microscope.
Yeah, well, our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has been to the launch of a new joint venture.
With governments continuing to drive towards net zero, it is somewhat on a collision course with farmers and, in turn, food inflation. Northern Ireland's Department of Agriculture has acknowledged the problems and is now working towards a solution that uses DNA technology to bring down CO2 levels. Victor Chestnut is the chairman of the SRG, a new board that is creating a database to breed in higher yielding and therefore less methane producing herds.
Identifying better genetics has no downsides for a farmer. No matter what breed you're in, no matter what, whether you're beef or dairy, knowing what you're breeding from and being efficient cuts emissions and increases your profitability.
There's nothing new about genetics and farms. In fact, it's been going on from around about 2009. But what is different here is this is government taking the lead with those from the industry, the Livestock and Meat Commission, the dairy producers, and more importantly,
the farmers themselves. Martin McKendry is from the Department of Agriculture and says that the government is listening and working alongside the industry.
There's a very clear agenda, there's a very focused agenda here in Northern Ireland. And to be fair, the industry have worked very much in partnership with DAERA in terms of developing this proposal. And the launch today of the SRG board, which is representative of all parts of the agri-food industry, is a great statement from the industry.
Chief Executive of the Livestock and Meat Commission, Ian Stevenson, believes efficiency will keep costs under control.
Well, I suppose the price of food really boils down to the efficiency that which that food can be got to the consumer shelf. So the more that we can produce livestock more efficiently in terms of less feed intake, using genetics to improve the resilience of those animals, how quickly they grow, how quickly they can produce product for the market, then that ultimately feeds through to, you know, a more efficient and more cost-effective product getting to the consumer shelf.
Milk prices are still on a downward slope, and Dr. Mike Johnson points to some of the factors causing milk prices to fall.
Well, the markets are what the markets are, and there's a number of drivers that are influencing the supply side. Globally, we've got a lot of milk that's being produced. Recent figures from New Zealand showed that they're seeing very significant increases in their milk production, the same in the United States. So there is at the minute an oversupply.
There's a cost and a benefit. There may well be, after DAERA might do something initially, but we may end up having to DNA tag, but it will be a quite small cost for the benefit we can get if you know your best cows to breed from and where you need to be.
As for the cows, they just wanted to move along and decided that no comment was better. Dougie Beattie, GB News, Brisbane.
They can lick the paint off your car, can a cow, with their tongues?
If you're listening on the radio, the reason we're saying that is because at the very last moment, the cow ate the microphone.
Oh,
or was trying to anyway, yeah.
You want to eat one of those things. But no, they get... Oh, cow's tongue. They're so rough. Makes a cat's tongue seem soft.
I find cows quite frightening, but they're supposed to be all right.
Oh, I like
big.
cows.
They're much bigger than you think.
Well, they are big. You've got to be careful with them, but I do like a cow. Love a slice of bread, you know. Used to feed them bread over the garden wall.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not good for them.
They were fine.
Like they should be eating grass.
They were fine. They had plenty of grass. They were in a field. That's a little treat, a slice of bread.
Right.
Anyway.
I believe you.
There you go. Now, let's catch up on all the sport and showbiz. David McGee and Stephanie Tetchy, good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Stephanie, let's kick off with you, should we?
Yes.
A bit of Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah, Jeremy, he put out that controversial column piece in December last year about Meghan Markle, well, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan, talking about how he spoke of his desire for her to parade the streets naked and for excrement to be thrown at her. It was based off a Game of Thrones scenes, but Ipso, who is the independent press standards organisation, has said that they have now said that column was deemed sexist, because that column received over 25,000 complaints. So for The Sun now, they have to publish the findings on their website, and where Jeremy's column would usually be now, they have to put all the findings up there. They said it wasn't, they haven't found it guilty of being racist against Meghan, but they said when it comes to sexism, it's definitely incited some sexism towards the Duchess. Jeremy did apologise about it when he said he was in error of writing such a piece about that. But I think it's quite... This is the first time Ipso's ever, held up a sexism complaint. But I think as a journalist, and if you have a column now, it's quite interesting because then you think to yourself, it's opened a can of worms, and potentially in the future, different columnists, if they're writing about Meghan now, they do have to be a bit careful.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I thought what he said was very distasteful.
Yeah,
actually.
it was nasty, but it was very Jeremy Clarkson.
But it wasn't.
It
wasn't. I don't think it was sexist.
I think Jeremy Clarkson has made a lot of sexist comments over the years. But I think what was interesting about this story, he was actually with the Dutch Camilla the day before he wrote this column. So that's why it didn't really look good on the Queen after this column came out, because he was just rubbing shoulders with her. So I don't know what kind of conversation he was having with the Queen about Meghan, but hey, I'll keep my mouth.
Yes, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no, I just think, Jeremy Clarkson's Jeremy Clarkson. And
Are you a fan of Clarkson?
Well, I never have been until his farming series.
Oh.
Have you watched it?
No, I've heard about it, though.
Yeah, and have you watched it?
No,
What's it called?
Diddly squat.
It's called Jeremy Clarkson's
it.
Farm. It's Clarkson's Farm, and it is utterly brilliant.
What makes it so good?
Because you just go through the travails. He sets himself a task of wanting to farm. He's got this enormous farm.
Yeah.
And until recently, he had farming managers to do it for him. And then I think his farming manager left after a long time. And he thought, I'll try it myself. I'll try running a farm myself for a year. And it was a Netflix documentary. A crew followed every cough and spit of it. And it's heartbreaking at times. He gets upset at times. He's desperately trying to make a profit. He's growing grain. He's buying cows. He's buying sheep that do all sorts of extraordinary things.
Oxfordshire, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just up the road from where I live, actually. And and then he tries to, he thinks, we've got all this meat, why don't I start a restaurant and a farm shop? And then he gets the planning council up against him. And at the end of the first year, this isn't giving away anything except it's this heartbreaking moment. Guess how much money he has made at the end of the first year? Because obviously he's trying to run a profit.
Maybe about 100,000?
£117.
OK, now.
Right.
And you've been through a year of heartbreak with him.
Plus whatever Netflix has paid.
Oh, yeah, no, but I'm saying it's about the running of the farm.
Yeah.
But he's broke
and it gives
even.
you an insight into farming that I have never.
He's broke even, though, yeah?
He broke even, but he broke his heart many times. He broke his back many times. He bought a ridiculous tractor. It's such fun. I
can see Aidan having a farm.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Too urban. I'm too much of an urban.
He is an urban boy. Let's have a look at the cricket, Aidan.
Yeah, well, Anne asked me a couple of hours ago what Bazball was, and it's kind of whacking the ball, but Geoffrey Boycott has tweeted recently just saying that it's batting without brains.
That's interesting.
Kamikaze cricket, it's been called. But look, they keep trying this again and again and again. Now, I'm not going to knock it too much because it gave England the ideal preparation going into this series. They won 11 out of 13 tests. It was working, but then you face the world champions. And it's a shame because England have played some great cricket in this series. They lost, they had control of the first test at Edgbaston, and then coming to Lords, where historically they've done quite well against Australia. And look, yesterday, six wickets for 46 runs, and they're being so defensive of this. People are calling it a cult of Bazball, and it's not the English cricket. It's not English cricket that we know. And top level sport is.
If they've trained this way for this test,
that's true.
If they change their tactics now, that could be equally dangerous because they've trained this way.
But it's such a long series. Look, I'm not saying we're only on the second test, so we could see from this point onwards, they could change. The pressure might force them to. But top-level sport is not just about implementing a strategy you've trained for, and sometimes in elite-level sport, you have to be pragmatic. And I think the time has come for that now because they're going to go down to 2-0, and that's bad because that wouldn't reflect the cricket that England have played. But I just think it needs to be tweaked somewhat.
Baz needs to go, doesn't he?
No, Baz doesn't need to go. No, Baz
Why not?
Why not? Because he's won 11 out of 13 tests. England have entertained. They've got results. This is the first bump in the road. It's not as if the previous cricket, the style of cricket, was winning all the time as well, Stephen. You have to remember that. And so, the first time we hit some difficulty, we need to stick with him. But I think he does need to be pragmatic. He does need to tweak it a little bit. Hopefully, we'll get some joy with that today.
I wish I understood cricket. I've never watched a cricket match in my life.
That's the charm of it, isn't
it?
It's just such a slow game, and I like sports, but cricket and snooker goes over my head.
Yeah,
really does. Well, maybe I'll watch it today. Actually, Aidan. Maybe I'll watch it.
I've never quite understood the whole thing because I used to live near Trent Bridge, and I never actually got round to going. But it was always the idea that you'd go and you'd take a hamper and sit there and just sort of snack and drink.
See, that sounds
and the
nice.
cricket is just sort of going on in the background.
That's what's wrong with that?
I like the sound of that.
But it's like the cricket's like the least important part of the day.
Well, that's how some people like it.
It's about the lifestyle around it.
It is. It's an event. That's it.
Have you been to a cricket match, Anne?
Well, yeah, I used to live very near Lords, and I went to one or two, and it's gorgeous. It's absolutely lovely. People dress up for it in their, you know, in their England. What is it? What's the? It's not the All England Club. That's Wimbledon.
No, it's the MCC, the
MCC,
Middlesex
yes,
County
that's
Football
right.
Club,
They all
yeah.
have their stripy ties, but they have their little picnic hampers as well, and bottles of things, and they have a wonderful time.
It's a bit like Paddington Station 20 minutes ago. I saw lots of people queuing up to go to the Henley Regatta.
Oh, there you go.
Oh,
Same
right.
sort of thing, yes.
Because it's all about getting dressed up and forget about the sport.
Yeah.
Harry could be making another Netflix documentary.
So we had the whole drama with Harry and Meghan and the fallout with Spotify, where they've lost their $20 million deal with them. So at the moment, people are saying, what's next for Harry and Meghan? Because it seems like they're very much going on separate paths and separate projects. There was a talk of Meghan maybe doing something with Dior. But now there's talk of Harry potentially doing a Netflix documentary based in Africa. Africa's always been a special place for Harry. He's always said it's where he feels most like himself. He's following Diana's footsteps, who would have been 62 today. She done a lot of work, but charity work with Africa. There's, at the moment, Hollywood, there's this big writer's strike at the moment, so apparently there's a delay on the concept of what this Netflix documentary will be with Harry.
Oh, so someone's got to... So
someone's got
a personal documentary and someone's got to write the script.
We know Harry's not the best when it comes to ideas, but I think he can deliver this.
The only thing is, I mean, I think that's much more what he should have been doing to begin with. It's much more respectable than just knocking the royal family all the time. But is it mega Netflix audience material? You know, a rather worthy documentary about his charity work in Africa?
I think because Harry, we've had like a Harry and Meghan overdose over the past 2 years, so I feel like anything they bring, there'll be that curiosity, but I don't know if there'll be that interest there at the moment.
There's a good story to tell.
Yeah.
No.
And maybe there will be if they put a writer onto it.
But you can sort of see it just being mediocre. You know, sort of interesting if there's nothing else that takes your fancy.
You know, there's been lots of stuff in Africa, so he would have to have something new, something gripping. He would have to get David Attenborough involved to make it really interesting, because Harry on his own...
I know. I think that's the problem they're facing.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in Wimbledon, I want to talk Wimbledon.
Yeah, well,
getting excited now.
Andy Murray is unseeded, as you mentioned earlier on, 36 years old. He has struggles with his body, his fitness in recent times, but he keeps going on. He was drawn yesterday against the 265th seed Ryan Peniston from Essex, 27 years old, bit of a latecomer to the tour, and he's got to kind of turn pro last year. So they're going to play off, they're going to meet in the first round at Wimbledon on probably Monday, possibly Tuesday, I'm not sure. But the draw was made yesterday, and the problem is if they get through that, they're going to have to face, or the winner's going to have to face Stefanos Tsitsipas or the world number 3 Dominic Thiem. But it's funny because Andy Murray was saying yesterday that his body just can't do what he was able to do 10 years ago. I know it seems an obvious thing to say, but he used to play five-a-side football to kind of unwind from a five-setter or after training or after knocking up or whatever. And the guy he's facing, Ryan Peniston, said that his coach called him yesterday to say, "You're up against Andy Murray," and he thought he was having a laugh. Didn't believe him.
It's a bit frightening.
I know.
How
it
old
is,
is he? 36?
Murray's 36. Yeah, Ryan Peniston's 27. Yeah, but as I say, a latecomer to the sport. It'd be a great story if Peniston won, actually.
It would be.
And
well, I'm all for getting you to, because I tell you what, right, Murray's done very well. He's won. He's won Wimbledon twice, but isn't it time we need to see that fresh blood rising?
Well, we do. We probably need to see it throughout the sport, actually, because I do worry. We've been talking for the last 10 years. Who's going to replace that triumvirate of Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, even Murray. Murray won 3 slams. Stan Wawrinka won 3 slams. Who's going to replace that group behind him? We've been waiting on it for an awful long time, and there have been people who've been threatening to do it. I think Carlos Alcaraz, having got the US Open under his belt, we've talked about Daniel Medvedev a couple of years ago as well. Didn't he won the US, but he hasn't been a springboard to winning Wimbledon, and Wimbledon's still the elite slam of the 4. Not by much.
How good that top 4 were.
Oh, incredible!
Keep winning again,
well, they kept winning multiple slams in their mid-30s.
Mid-30s.
It was. We'll probably never see it again.
Well, that sounds being old, doesn't it? What about Naomi Campbell?
Oh, Naomi.
She had a second baby at 53 by
surrogate. She never admits that she's had the babies by surrogate. I don't know why she's not being.
Well, at 53, she'd be a medical marvel.
It's like, I'm just like, be honest about how you had it, because I think a lot of women think, oh, when they see these celebrities having babies later, they think, oh, I don't have to worry about kids till 45. But a lot of these celebrities, they've either frozen their eggs or they've got surrogates, but they're never open about it. But yes, Naomi has become a mother for a second time at the age of 53. She put out the message advantage. It's never too late to be a mother, but yes, it is biologically.
But I also think, don't you, in 10 years' time, she'll be 63.
Yeah.
And she'll have a 10-year-old running around her ankles.
2 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is, it is different.
Well, I suppose she'll have probably 18 nannies, though.
But I still don't think that helps. You know, you're still a mum and you want to be with them.
and you want to bond with your children. You want to be there for
play
those
with
moments.
Them. And at 63, she's going to be an awful lot tireder than she thinks.
Yeah, I don't know how...
I had older parents, though. I thought it helped us. I thought it was good for us, yeah. I mean, I lost them sooner than average, which is hard to take. Yeah. But when we were kids, it was a definite advantage having older parents, I think.
Yeah. How old was your mum when she had you then?
How old was she been? She was born in 44. She was 33, but don't forget I've got a younger brother as well. So she was giving birth right until close to 40. But Dad was 11 years older than her. Yeah. So he was having kids. Yeah. He was having kids in his 50s.
Yeah. It's just the impact on the kids when the time comes.
Yeah.
As long as the kids feel loved, that is the main thing.
Look, well, you two are both loved by us.
Oh, thank you.
If nobody else, thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Indeed.
Leaning into the love.
No, I love it. We're back 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Esther and Phil are here next with Saturday Morning Live.
Morning, Alex Deacon here with your weekend weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Yes, it's a bit grey out there for many of us first thing, but it should get a bit brighter. Bright and breezy kind of sums up the weekend. There will be some showers, particularly across the north, close to this area of low pressure, and that will also generate some strong winds, especially tonight and tomorrow over northern Scotland. For most of us, as I say, just a bit of a breezy day. Yesterday's cloud and rain has been cleared away. It is fairly grey to start with this morning, a little bit of light rain and drizzle here and there, but that is petering out. And skies are generally brightening up with some sunny spells for most of us by lunchtime and through the afternoon. Now, one area it's likely to stay pretty wet, the far north of Scotland, especially Shetland, looks like having a fairly soggy day. Light winds here, but the wind's picking up across the northwest of Scotland, blowing in plenty of showers over the Highlands. The odd one for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, but many places across England and Wales will stay dry and bright. Temperatures high teens in the north, low 20s further south. If you're heading out this evening, again, most places will be dry, but take note across northern Scotland. Further showers to come in here, and the wind's just strengthening further, getting really quite gusty tonight and for tomorrow across a good part of Scotland. Still further outbreaks of rain to come over the Northern Isles and more showers to come into western Scotland. But otherwise, most of us having a dry night. A fresh